This is Gate, a mid-rank swordsman, an average soldier with average skills. In a war that had already claimed more than 5 million lives, he was a mercenary who carried a greatsword while serving in the army against the demon army. Just another soldier who followed the army's strict discipline. All of this just to survive. After waking up, he was pissed that he had dreamed about his low level again. Walking out of the tent with his sword, he asked who was supposed to be on watch. Scully said it was Morris. Gate cursed the damn dwarf because he had told him 1,000 times not to leave his post. And even if the low-ranking soldiers let it slide, the higher-ups wouldn't. Then he asked for today's enlistment list. In this world, there are the Transcendents, the 10 legendary weapons. Those who manage to draw these weapons are classified as Transcendents. According to the prophecy, only when all 10 gather on the same day and pierce the heart of the Black Dragon will this war finally end. Back to Gate, he was still pissed about having to evaluate these rookies. Meanwhile, Scully was freaking out because if anyone heard him talking like that, they'd be screwed. Because remember, this is an authoritarian army. In the end, the girl told him to choose someone who was mentally strong. But Gate, of course, kept complaining. Because in the end, it's the soldiers who choose the weapons. And if this place falls, it's game over for everyone. Seeing the supervisor ahead, the girl cursed under her breath, while the two of them saluted. This was Uldring, a high-rank dark mage. Gate got pissed off just looking at his face. Then, standing in front of the rookie squad, he thought that there were rotten people everywhere. Gate shouted at the skinny recruits, ordering them to yell on the count of 3. If they wanted to stay in the army, they had to show their willpower. Even if they weren't selected for a squad, they would still be assigned to some position within the barracks. The girl in front had scored the highest possible score on the exam. Recruit Swan. The ugly-faced guy was Recruit Xenia, number 29, and a half-elf, half-pig was number 13, Beck. Our average guy, Gate, was the commander of this squad, and incredibly enough, the sword on his back was a transcendent weapon. Then they started handing out the squad uniforms. Recruit number 13 was already causing trouble, but the high-rank dark mage said he would be accompanying the recruits. Just seeing someone from the higher ranks made young Morris start trembling. Gate asked him how he was doing, but right then someone stepped on his face. He cursed at the dwarf while pressing his foot against his face. This was another high-rank knight, Jaga. Gate tried to help his friend, but the authoritarian Jaga ordered the dwarf to stand up. At the same time, he slapped him across the face again. When Gate raised his hand to make him stop, Jaga got pissed and asked if that was a challenge. Our boy said it wasn't. But this guy was the absolute peak of authoritarianism, asking if he wanted another scar on his face. A vague prophecy found in the scriptures emerged just as the long waiting period began to fade away. Surprised by the scene, the man asks if he really managed to pull the mythical legendary weapon. Right after, the young man wonders in astonishment if that meant he was a true transcendent. In front of the crowd of soldiers, the man questions whether the scripture is nothing more than a legend. With that, the narration explains that the balance of that cruel war depended on a strict hierarchy. Since the races were so different, the established order needed to be maintained even more severely. Furthermore, it reveals that the idea of a transcendent was merely an illusion to maintain control. As they stare at each other, the warrior asks if the other is covering for him because they are both transcendents. Without backing down, the young man replies provocatively, asking if his rival wants another scratch on his face. Faced with the direct threat, the other warrior remains silent as the tension between them grows. The two men continue to glare at each other, keeping a heavy atmosphere around the place. Suddenly, the young elf girl comes running and calls out loudly for the veteran Jaga. Upon hearing the call, Jaga quietly turns his head to look at the arriving girl. Then, the veteran asks directly what was happening for her to come there. The girl explains that the officer ordered everyone to report to the administrative office immediately. Faced with the order, Jaga questions out loud upon hearing about the exchange of the new spear. He then grumbles under his breath and warns that he will meet them later at the military barracks. As he walks away, the warrior brutally pushes the girl while she responds hesitantly. Worried, the young woman asks if something is wrong, while the young man criticizes Jaga's behavior. When asked if he was okay, the small ally explains that he used defensive magic earlier. Next, he comments that Jaga came from far away looking to take advantage of a new recruit. Recalling that situation, the warrior curses the guy again due to his previous behavior. At this, the leader scolds the gnome for making a mistake in front of such troublesome people. Reassuring his companion, Gate only asks him to keep his full focus on the upcoming tasks. While picking up the papers, The young man questions how often his small ally needs to step out. The narration explains that a gnome's metabolism is much faster than a human's. Furthermore, the text highlights that this species has a sensitive and quite delicate digestive system. While reviewing the documents, Gate asks if the young woman was woken up from her rest just for that. Then, the warrior instructs everyone to go inside while he goes to check on the new recruits. Right after, the scene shows the tents where the unit's new recruits are settled. Upon entering the tent, the image of recruit number 29, Xenia, comes into focus. As she stares intently at her other roommate, silence settles in the tent. Then, Swan wonders, annoyed, what that girl's problem with her could be. Meanwhile, Xenia mutters quietly, complaining about being stared at for no apparent reason from the start. Looking to the side, the recruit notices the presence of the guy standing at the entrance. With that, she remembers that the guy looks like the one who hit on them at the club. The memory shows the bustling entrance of the tavern where they were during peacetime. On that occasion, a friend was telling how Beth broke up her relationship after being cheated on with a dwarf. Right after, the young man approached their table, greeting them both warmly. With an excited gesture, he invited the pair to enjoy the night and leave together. However, Swan declined, saying the two of them were in the middle of a deep conversation. Politely, the young man said he would come back in 5 minutes in case they changed their minds about going out. As soon as they walked away, her companion questioned why she turned down handsome guys. Swan responded that she preferred more robust men, even accepting the idea of dating someone from another species. Returning to the present, the recruit sighs with nostalgia, remembering how good those old times were. Changing the subject, the instructor announces the explanation about vaccines before tomorrow's training. Hearing the instruction, Xenia wonders if there really are no healers in that military camp. Then, the instructor demands discipline and orders all recruits to answer much louder. Right after giving the orders, the officer leaves and closes the entrance of the tent. With his departure, absolute silence takes over the entire recruit's tent. Sitting on the floor, the girl observes the room, noticing how uncomfortable that atmosphere was. Suddenly, Swan leans back, complaining that the guy acts superior without having any seniority. Hearing the complaint, another soldier tells her to keep her voice down and fix her posture. Faced with the insult, Swan points at the guy while the two trade insults, telling each other to step up. Seeing the argument break out, Xenia complains under her breath about how those two are making a mess. At that moment, Gate opens the tent curtain carrying documents and his sword on his back. Seeing the transcendent instructor enter the tent, all the recruits immediately fall silent. In the face of that imposing presence, Xenia gulps nervously upon noticing the arrival of the new instructor. Then, recruit number 13, named Nartz, warns them to be careful with eye contact. Staring at the guy, the young woman wonders who that useless-looking man could be. Indignantly, the recruit complains, asking if he shouldn't be the truly offended one there. Looking over the papers, Gate questions the reason for so many uniform changes for a single recruit. At that moment, soldier number 13 steps forward and confirms he is the one responsible. Then, Nartz explains in detail that his annual luck and personal palette do not match with Brown. Losing patience, the instructor tells the guy to stop talking nonsense and get dressed already. While the recruit grumbles loudly, Gate firmly orders him to get inside the tent immediately. Standing at the entrance, the warrior questions what the others are doing and orders everyone inside. Under immense pressure, the recruit tries to hold back while quietly pleading for everything to stop. Suddenly, the young man loses control and screams, demanding that they stop manipulating him like that. Faced with the outburst, the instructor's eyes darken as he releases an extremely intimidating presence in the place. With that, the heavy aura spreads through the quarters, making the air instantly freeze inside the tent. Shocked by his attitude, the soldiers wonder in disbelief at what the guy just said. Watching the scene, Swan remarks to herself that the guy is a very troublesome soldier. In a cold voice, Gate announces that he found a winner and orders everyone to get down. Without thinking twice, all the recruits drop to the floor and start doing push-ups. With a stern look, the instructor warns that next time, he will turn their lives into hell. Faced with the direct threat, all the recruits respond immediately, confirming they understood the order. While enduring the punishment, one of the recruits sweats profusely, trying to keep up with the exercise routine. On the floor of the quarters, the soldier mutters to himself as he rests his head, completely out of strength. The next day, the officers order everyone to line up together and expose their left shoulder. While receiving the vaccine, the young man finds it strange that a female archer is giving the medical injections. Beside the instructor, the small ally asks Gate if that was really necessary. Then, the leader asks if the boy knows why the cook uses a mechanical leg. The master explains that the healer tried to treat a severe wound using only healing magic. Hearing the explanation about tetanus from rusty cuts, the small ally admits his fear. Furthermore, the narration highlights that not even the great archmage could defeat tetanus. Suddenly, noises of commotion in the distance catch the instructor's attention in the middle of the camp. Looking at the agitated crowd, the warrior wonders what all the yelling is about. At that moment, the female archer arrives in a hurry, calling for Gate, who asks what had happened. Quite frightened, the young woman reports that recruit number 13 has disappeared from the training grounds. Upon hearing the revelation, Gate exclaims loudly, asking what the girl just said. When it comes to recruit 13, the warrior immediately accuses and calls the guy a pig. Annoyed, Gate asks who was supervising, and the young elf explains that Jaga moved up the vaccination. As soon as the girl tries to explain herself, the veteran Jaga threatens to kill her if she talks back again. Realizing the mistake that was made, Gate yells out loud, asking if anyone saw where the guy went. At that moment, the recruit Xenia steps forward, activating her special vision ability to help. Noticing the girl, the warrior approaches and asks directly if she managed to spot the fugitive. Concentrating her visual power on the horizon, the young girl focuses her sight to track the distant recruit. Pointing up high, Xenia informs them that the boy is crossing the mountain behind the camp. Observing the distant terrain, the group surprisingly repeats the location where the runaway might be going. Frightened by the revelation, Gate wonders if that guy really dared to go to the mountain range. Meanwhile, the recruit advances alone through the desolate valley toward the region's dangerous mountains. Overcome with great satisfaction, the soldier exclaims to himself that he was finally the chosen one. Brandishing the magic staff, Nartz confidently asserts that the powerful item was made especially for him. The young man remembers when the instructor told him to put on the uniform while criticizing his actions as a transcendent. In his memory, the other soldiers appear laughing and mocking while making fun of his situation. Returning to the present with a dark smile, Nartz declares that the time has come to demonstrate everything. Holding the artifact, the young man whispers that he will make everyone shut up and asks if they recognize him. Upon hearing the instructor's voice telling him to stop, the young man turns around, completely clueless. Standing behind the fences, Gate and his small ally observe the scene in absolute silence. Then, the master bellows that touching that will cost him his arm and orders him to get out of there. Refusing to listen, Nartz warns them not to move and states that he will touch the weapon. Faced with imminent danger, Gate and his small companion let out a cry of pure tension. In a defiant tone, the recruit declares that the uniform restrictions didn't work against him. Irritated by the speech, Gate asks what nonsense that is, and orders him to come down immediately. Mockingly, Nartz asks for honesty and says the master only fears the heir of the Beckenborgs. Out of patience, the instructor reveals that the young man got the worst grade and isn't even fit to be a soldier. Furthermore, the instructor states that his skills are equivalent to those of a slow forest goblin. Explaining the danger of the weapon, Gate warns that the item requires preparation and orders him to come down at once. Indignant, Nartz questions whether he is being judged under the same standards given to common plebeians. Then, the young man states that it is the chosen one's destiny to guide fools along the path. Reaching his hand out toward the artifact, he declares that he will accept his great destiny right then. With his hand stretched forward, Gate shouts loudly, begging him to stop immediately. As soon as the young man touches the magic artifact, the energy reacts, and he lets out a murmur. Then, the object's power transforms the recruit into a monstrous creature, collapsing onto the ground. Fallen on the ground, the transformed young man tries to move while making strange sounds non-stop. Running toward the runaway, Gate curses at the recruit, calling him a massive idiot. On the ground, the transformed guy cries endlessly while whimpering in the face of that situation. Observing the creature on the ground, the small ally questions whether that might be an orc or an elf. Pressed for time, Gate warns Morris that they need to go down the mountain as fast as possible. At another moment, the instructor explains that dark magic works exactly like a severe curse. The master adds that today's training will focus on building resistance to the black fog. Looking around, Xenia notices Nartz's absence and wonders if he has deserted. As he kneels, the instructor uses his magic staff to begin the intensive training. Adjusting her mask on her face, Xenia considers it peculiar to train by enduring this fog. Standing in line, the girl questions the usefulness of receiving dark magic directly during class. Suddenly, the master orders everyone to take off their masks, leaving the recruit completely stunned. Amid the dense fog, Xenia curses softly while trying to hold her clothes to breathe. Then, the girl complains about them applying this absurd training and calling it adaptation. At the same time, the other soldiers cough and grow sick from contact with the fog. Suddenly, an out-of-control recruit charges at the instructor, demanding that he get out of the way. Completely out of his mind, the young man displays an insane smile with his mouth full of saliva. Without losing control, Gate restrains the soldier from behind until he groans helplessly. While they suffer, the master orders them to sing a military song and begin the count. The recruit comments that, regardless of the training, that didn't look like the formation of a mage. Tearing up in the smoke, Xenia notices that this instructor uses devilish acts to secure his position. Then she reflects that becoming that man's assistant will only bring abuse and heavy labor. With teary eyes, the girl wonders if she can stand such a detestable person. In light of the advertisement's promises, the girl considers that she will have to endure everything to get her reward. Then, Xenia grumbles that the military system is flawed and should offer distinct promotions. Finally, Gate orders the front line to maintain formation and leave the cave. With the activity over, the instructor grants a 5-minute break before the next training session. Being an orphan, Xenia explains that she isn't seeking grand causes, wanting only to save money to leave. The recruit adds that her only major goal is not to die and to live until she's 500. At that moment, she spots Gate approaching with the unconscious recruit carried on his back. Faced with that rather strange scene, Xenia remains silent as she tries to understand what happened. With a firm gaze, Gate comments with disdain that the useless recruit was finally captured. Then, the instructor asks worriedly if they found the boy and if he is dying. The young archer warns in panic that there are no healers in the unit, leaving the master irritated. The leader asks if Morris can help, but the gnome explains that his magic works differently. When stared down by Gate, the dark mage states that his specialty is only weakening. The leader orders them to seek help at the sacred spring, and the girl promises to check the location again. Interrupting everyone's argument, Xenia raises her hand and identifies herself as Recruit 7. Then, the girl firmly states that the problem can be solved with dark magic. Upon hearing this statement, Gate and the mage react in surprise, not understanding the young girl's proposal. Recruit Xenia explains that a cursed creature is attached to his body, creating a parasitic effect. Pointing to the shadow on the recruit's back, the girl reveals that it is a tentacle. Continuing the explanation, Xenia asserts that the creature can be weakened by dark magic. Faced with the argument, the mage refuses the idea and tells everyone to wait for the healers to arrive. However, Gate agrees with the young girl and demands that they try the emergency treatment. Then, the master reinforces that they have nothing to lose if the attempt ends up failing. With that, Xenia asks to use the mage's staff, prompting the man to hand over the object. Holding the magic staff firmly, the girl positions herself directly above the fallen soldier. Closing her eyes, the young girl begins to recite the spell while channeling the required energy. Right after, a large magic circle appears on the ground around the afflicted young man. Under the impact of the magic, the fallen recruit reacts immediately, letting out a groan of pain. Gradually, the dark energy begins to dissipate from the arm of the soldier affected by the curse. Upon concluding the ritual, Xenia announces that she is finished as the smoke clears from the area. With that, Nartz finally returns to his normal form and sleeps peacefully on the dry ground. Faced with the ritual's success, Gate and the other master observe the scene without reaction. Quite exhausted from the effort, the girl wipes the sweat from her forehead with her hand. Observing the young girl carefully, the dark mage comments that she proved to be quite useful. As night falls over the fortress, the sky takes on dark tones above the mountains. In a gloomy cave, the monstrous creature watches the young recruits through broken mirrors. In the mirror fragment, Xenia's reflection appears as the creature observes her. Meanwhile, a carriage speeds along the fortress's imposing walls during the night. Looking back, the young archer warns the master that the military police have already arrived at the location. Questioned about Nartz's future, Gate replies that they will decide between discharging him or sending him to prison. The girl comments in surprise that the young man truly believed he was a great high-level transcendent. Suddenly, a messenger rushes into the room, calling for Leader Gate in a very loud voice. The small soldier warns that the warrior has been summoned to report to the officer's room immediately. Surprised by the order, Gate questions why the two of them are being called together at the same time. Next, the scene shows the main tent where the camp's officer's room is located. Upon entering the tent, Gate and his small companion watch in astonishment at the tense atmosphere of the place. Faced with the scene, the warrior notes the extremely heavy mood in the room filled with superior officers. The officer defends Nartz, stating that the young man ended up losing control due to unfair orders received. The injured superior adds that the situation generated a feeling of inferiority in the unprepared transcendents. Furthermore, he states that ignoring procedures to draw the weapon served to relieve anxiety. Upon hearing such accusations, Gate questions without understanding what the other man is saying there. Then, the veteran laments that the new recruits are immature and takes full blame. With that, he acknowledges his own responsibility and guarantees he will severely discipline both soldiers. Upon hearing those words, Gate shouts Jaga's name out loud and curses the man. Right after that, the veteran laments the recruit's lack of experience and takes full responsibility for what happened. Frightened by the accusation, the little ally screams, claiming they would never do such a thing. Losing his patience, the giant sergeant cuts him off and tells the boy to shut his mouth immediately. Faced with the chaos unfolding, the commander looks sternly and calls for everyone's attention. Next, Rebecca openly declares her deep disappointment with the behavior of both officers present. The commander stresses that they should admit their mistake and apologize for their inappropriate behavior. Seeing this, Gate apologizes, explaining that the little ally is still adjusting to the unit. Then, the instructor takes full responsibility and admits he acted without thinking when he gave the order. Upon hearing the confession, Rebecca praises his direct attitude and explains the reason for her earlier scolding. Interrupting the conversation, the military police guard warns that the matter cannot simply be ignored. Faced with his firm stance, the commander asks for a moment and approaches the guards to talk. Speaking softly, she suggests an internal punishment, reminding the guard that they are dealing with transcendence. Pressing the officer, Rebecca brings up her time at the military academy to assert her authority through seniority. Then, the woman breaks the tension and suggests resolving everything peacefully between the parties. Finally, the guard agrees to let the punishment be handled internally through a written report. Relieved by the outcome, the little soldier comments that everything turned out well thanks to the commander. With a grim look, the veteran stares at the boy and coldly asks if he is laughing. Immediately after, Jaga orders his subordinate to meet him alone later in his office. While holding the punishment notice, Gate listens to his rival mockingly say that they got very lucky. The document details that the instructor and Maurice must run 10 laps in full gear for 7 days. Complaining about the injustice, the boy cries while the leader explains that this is common and requires adaptation. During days of intense training in the rain, the recruits crawl their way across the military field. Following direct orders to advance, the troop marches together carrying their magic staves through the storm. Upon receiving the order to fire, the mages concentrate energy into their staves and attack the targets. As the 5 weeks pass, Swan cleans her boots while reflecting on the time gone by. While polishing her footwear, the young recruit refuses to help her comrade and comments on how bored she is. Hearing her comrades talk about selections, Swan realizes that everyone has adapted remarkably well. However, the girl admits to herself that there is something she just cannot get used to. Right after, the cursed soldier appears lying on the ground, barking like a stray animal. Watching the pitiful scene, Swan deeply regrets having helped the guy in the past. Then, the officer announces that he will post the midterm evaluation grades there for everyone to check. Looking at the grade list, the recruit wonders in confusion what that was all about. Seeing Nartz's name in 3rd place, the recruit questions how his grade could be so high. On the other side, the veteran Jaga approaches the young man, asking if he feels any discomfort. The soldier praises the armor, while the veteran replies that it is just heavy and poor in quality. Observing the scene, Zinnia concludes that the veteran is openly flattering the other recruit. Then, the girl wonders in surprise if he is trying to turn the young man into a transcendent. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the officers' quarters area of the unit. Analyzing the documents, the gnome questions the grades, and Gate explains that Jaga forged everything. The master questions the value of the grades, but the gnome counters by explaining their true importance. Then the gnome laments the advisor's stay and wonders what the reaction will be. When asked if he is angry, Gate states that he expects nothing from humans. Impressed by the warrior's attitude, the gnome openly criticizes Jaga's behavior there. Back at the quarters, the thirsty recruit asks if there is holy water to drink. Irritated, Jaga demands to know who is in charge of the water, and Swan and Zinnia step forward together. Carrying the pitcher, Zinnia complains about the weight and suggests that the giants should be doing this work. While the recruit offers to carry the pitcher, Zinnia asks to rest for a bit before continuing. Looking at the walls, the recruit asks about the paintings, and she explains that they are war heroes. Observing a painting, Zinnia comments that the general's hideous face would even make demons run away. Hearing the comment, the soldier tries to interrupt her, visibly embarrassed by the situation. Right after, the young man reveals that the figure portrayed in the painting is his father. Nervous about the discovery, Zinnia quickly changes her mind and starts praising the man's appearance. Curious, the girl questions his presence, and the recruit responds that he must serve his country. Hearing the answer, Zinnia mentally laments being surrounded by people full of privilege and talent. While watching him, the recruit ponders if her comrade sees her as just a poor person. In reality, the young man is only thinking about how to drink from the cup without touching it with his lips. Next, the two recruits set the heavy water pitcher down on the ground. During the task, the soldier asks about choices, and Zinnia states that she will try to draw the sword. Her comrade mentions he will do the same, and the recruit reminds him that he was the next one called. With that, Zinnia comments that they called Narts first, and her comrade immediately curses the other recruit. In front of the officers gathered in the tent, the superior asks if there is any problem there. Checking Recruit 13's file, the elf confirms his grade but questions his decision. While looking at the paper, the attendant wonders if the young man is simply picking anything at random. In a confident tone, the recruit responds, stating that he made that decision after thinking a lot about it. Watching the scene, Jaga concludes that whatever option is chosen will keep the recruit under his command. Tapping his finger on the table, the candidate declares that he will remain serving in the Central Corps. Then the recruit officially announces his decision to request the position of knight. Faced with such an unexpected declaration, all the officers present in the tent remain in absolute silence. Hearing that, Jaga's eyes widen, unable to comprehend the request made by that boy. In shock over the choice, the veteran questions what he just heard in utter disbelief. While Jaga tries to intervene, the superior praises him, stating that it is an excellent choice. Placing a hand on the recruit's shoulder, the commander states that he made a courageous choice. Looking back in fright, the little gnome asks Gate what is happening there. Faced with that unexpected response, the little companion's eyes widen, unable to understand the situation. Observing everyone's reaction, the warrior gives a faint, satisfied smile at the outcome. Then, Gate reveals that Recruit 13 will be going to the military unit's third quarters. Walking forward, the instructor simply replies that he will understand if he pays close attention. As he walks through the night, Gate curses his rival, accusing him of accepting massive bribes. The warrior adds that his rival lied to the officers, claiming the recruit was an elite. Next, Gate explains that Recruit 13 was always desperately seeking attention. Because of this, the young recruit naturally sought out the only person who gave him attention in the camp. All it took was a single compliment from the veteran, saying that a knight's uniform would suit him very well. Recalling the past, the gnome realizes that this was what Gate was talking about during the run. With the announcement, Jaga stands frozen, realizing he has been completely discarded from the role of advisor. Faced with that major plot twist, the warrior realizes that his own plan ended up failing miserably. While watching it all, Gate smiles with satisfaction, seeing that his plan against Jaga worked. Going back a few minutes in time, someone questions Recruit number 13's decision. Looking at the papers, Oldring doubts that that soldier is truly a student with excellent grades. At that moment, the pieces of what was happening began to fall into place in the mage's mind. The elf realized that Jaga would keep the gold while he would take care of the problematic recruit. Upon understanding the whole trap, Oldring immediately realizes he ended up falling for a massive scam. Faced with this, the elf complains bitterly, but Jaga asks for silence and demands obedience to orders. Mockingly, the veteran asks if his colleague does not feel capable of training a newbie. Back to the present, Recruit 13 states that he will continue serving at the Federation's Central Academy. Next, the young man officially requests his direct transfer to the position of knight. At that instant, Jaga turns completely frozen upon remembering that he is the senior knight of that company. On the other side, Oldring starts laughing out loud as he realizes that the burden has fallen on Jaga. Before the officer, the elf excitedly agrees and states that it was an excellent precedent. Next, Oldring praises Jaga for treating Narts without prejudice and upholding equality between races. Ironically, the mage adds that the superiors greatly valued the sincerity of his fellow veteran. While the elf celebrates the positive outcome, Jaga tries to argue that the decision was too hasty. Smiling mockingly, the mage asks why the veteran suddenly changed his tone. Next, the elf tells his rival to accept the result and obey the military hierarchy. Despite his comrades' taunts, the veteran remains silent in front of the officers on site. Furthermore, the warrior had no idea that Gate had planned every single detail of the whole situation. Observing the surroundings, the instructor tells himself that it wasn't over yet. Looking at his companion, the gnome ponders whether Gate isn't the real demon there. Meanwhile, Deep in the forest, the small animal hears a voice calling nearby. Observing the road, the animal watches the soldiers marching while the officer commands the line. Next, the instructor orders the front row to step forward half a pace to a line. While marching with the heavy load, the soldier notices a rather unusual stone on the ground. Quickly, the young man bends down and picks up the object to keep it as a nice souvenir. As the troop moves forward through the dark night, a medical carriage speeds right past them. Encouraging the recruits, the instructor shouts that the march will end as soon as they cross the hill. Exhausted, Zania tells herself that she needs to keep walking until she finishes the training. United in the dark, the troop marches in formation, singing military songs to keep the pace. With the military march completed, the battalion's 6-week training finally came to an end. Right after, the officers announced the start of the ceremony to try to draw the legendary weapon. During the event, the small ally asks Gate if that was only the 3rd attempt. In response, the instructor explains that according to the prophecy of the scriptures, everything must end in the 10th round. On the podium, the officer gives a speech stating that everyone worked very hard for that noble tradition. Soon after, it is announced that the battalion's apprentices will begin the drawing ritual. With a firm voice, Gate calls the summoned recruits and warns that this class has 2 candidates. Then, the master calls recruit Zania and her companion Swan to start warming up. Before the altar, the 2 recruits release energy as they prepare for the attempt. The officer announces that recruit Zania will be the first to try due to her score. In silence, the young woman tells her companion that she will be the one to draw the legendary weapon. The narration highlights the legendary weapon stuck in the rock, impossible to pull by ordinary means. However, Swan boasts an impressive physique, claiming that legends mean nothing against raw strength. Frightened by her size, the girl comments that such muscle mass compares to that of ogres. Watching the astonishing scene, Zania is bewildered and wonders if that might be a matter of genetics. With that, the recruit takes a firm stance to pull the object stuck in the ground. Exerting absurd force, the young woman screams for her father while trying to remove the weapon. Faced with failure, the girl remains motionless and silent after failing to move anything. Out of breath, Zania asks if anyone has a shovel, but they immediately order her to get out of there. Right after, the officer calls recruit number 7, Swan, to make her attempt. Seeing her step forward, the other recruits comment that the young woman got the best score in the class. In a solemn tone, the officer commands in the name of the scriptures for the qualified one to wield the weapon. With the order given to pull, the young woman positions herself in front of the stuck object. Without hesitating, Swan grips the shaft of the artifact with both hands, applying all her strength. Watching the attempt closely, the small ally swallows hard beside the master. Focused on the goal, the young woman repeats to herself that she will manage to pull the stuck item. Despite the immense effort and the trembling in her hands, the object remains completely still there. Surprised by the result, Swan wonders indignantly why the weapon won't move. Seeing the failure, the soldiers question if the scriptures could be wrong for the first time. In silence, the girl wonders if she ended up miscalculating after being so certain at first. Looking at the girl, the young man casually comments that he isn't as clever as before. Thinking that giving up would be easier, the young recruit freezes, not understanding what happened. Unable to let go of the weapon, Zania asks aloud why her hand froze. Suddenly, an intense aura emerges around the girl and spreads across the entire place. Faced with the sudden appearance of that energy, the young woman looks around, not understanding what is happening. Seeing the girl motionless, the recruits ask why she remains standing still there. Faced with the unexpected event, Gate stares at the girl and comments on the recruit's situation. Next, the instructor reveals that the girl ended up encountering the spirit of the Crimson Cloud. Staring straight at the young woman, the dark entity coldly declares that she is far too murky. The spirit adds that, unlike the former master, Zania possesses no true ambition. Furthermore, the spirit reveals that the recruit spends her nights reading cheap romance fiction. Hearing the details of her routine, Zania flatly denies it and questions the claims made. Lowering her head, the girl asks directly if that means she is unfit. Changing its mind, the spirit accepts the recruit and declares it will grant her the Dark Dew. Then, the entity states that it prefers Zania much more than the other contenders. Next, the entity explains that the weapon corrupts the user, but it trusts her simple ambitions. Hearing that the object now belongs to her, the girl thanks it, but tries to defend her reading. Raising her voice, the recruit energetically insists that the book is not just any romance novel. Holding the staff high, Swan shouts for everyone to hear that it is true literature. Faced with that surprising declaration, the master and the others present stare at the girl, completely bewildered. Right after, the young recruit regains consciousness and wonders in surprise about everything. Seeing the weapon pulled out, some soldiers begin to applaud the young woman's feat. The narration explains that she managed to pull the weapon and confirms Swan as a transcendent. Furthermore, the emergence of the first female transcendent deeply touches the hearts of certain women. Watching the commotion from afar, the female warriors criticize the situation while commenting on the newcomer. Amidst the excited crowd, a veteran cheers and declares that he fully recognizes her worth. Suddenly, the warrior freezes with wide eyes upon noticing something strange in the air. Looking at the distant horizon, the man observes dark smoke rising over the mountain. With a watchful and focused gaze, the soldier senses an extremely sinister aura in that direction. Faced with that distant threat, the warrior remains on alert while the heavy energy spreads. Then, the dark mist expands over the mountaintop, covering the entire sky. Amidst the rocks, monstrous creatures emerge, watching all the movement around them intently. Then, the graduation ceremony for the new recruits begins under a heavily overcast sky. Watching the movement, Zinnia reflects that training is over, but recognizes it is only the beginning. Suddenly, her fellow recruit appears right behind the girl and calls out to her in a mysterious tone. Startled, the recruit asks the reason for that, and he explains he avoided disrupting the ceremony. Then, the young man reveals he spotted several monstrous creatures gathering on the mountain peak. With that, the soldier hands over a pointed object and asks her to pass it along to Instructor Gate. Holding the artifact, he warns that he doesn't know what it is, but it seems dangerous. Confused by the item, Zinnia agrees to deliver the object to the leader. Suddenly, the soldier opens his arms dramatically in front of the quite surprised recruit. Then, the young man hugs the young girl tightly, thanking her for the moments shared during training. Seeing her fellow recruit walk away, Zinnia promises to send news as soon as she gets her leave. At the same time, other recruits hug each other, crying and exchanging affectionate insults in their final farewell. As the carriages depart, the rookies shout goodbyes, asking to stay in touch after leaving. Watching everyone depart, the girl bids a silent farewell in her mind, knowing she will never see them again. Seeing the excitement, the veterans comment that back in the day, rookies didn't get leave from the army. Chuckling softly, the gnome comments that he managed to enjoy civilian food for almost 5 whole days. Faced with the statement, the leader and the archer scold their small ally for his lack of tact. Meanwhile, the recruit adjusts the details of her new uniform before officially reporting. Looking at the outfit, Zinnia mumbles about the new fabric being stiff and tight across her chest. Wielding her staff, the young girl declares that from that moment on, they would be one. Exiting the tent, Zinnia announces she has finished changing, and the gnome tells her to follow him. Then, the small ally hands over a military notebook for the girl to read. The gnome explains that the manual contains veteran data and schedules, while Zinnia acknowledges it. The small soldier advises memorizing the daily passwords to avoid trouble with the local veterans. Before leaving, her companion orders the young girl to memorize everything and always carry the communicator. Alone in the room, Zinnia looks at the pages, confident that memorizing is her great specialty. Suddenly, repeated noises outside catch the recruit's silent attention. Through the window, Instructor Gate appears performing the movements of the first basic sword form. With precision, the warrior executes a powerful strike capable of splitting large boulders in half. Watching the training, Zinnia wonders if this simple sword technique actually works in combat. Suddenly, Zinnia remembers the thorny object she had received from her fellow recruit. Meanwhile, Uldring laughs happily as he flips through the manual containing the tasks for the new assistants. Walking excitedly, the mage plans to pass all the accumulated tasks onto his smart new assistant. Passing by the quarters, he hears complaints and mocks the deplorable state of the military facility. Holding the notebook, the elf sings merrily, celebrating how much easier his military life has become. Suddenly, a threatening voice calls out to him, interrupting his grand moment of celebration. 2 advanced veterans appear in his path and order the mage to approach them immediately. The elf girl, an advanced healer of the unit, smiles fixedly as she watches the man standing there. Beside her, the giant warrior wears an intimidating expression as she stares at the silent young man. Tense before the veterans, Uldring responds nervously, while the text reveals his true military rank. Ironically, the healer asks the reason for such joy, but the elf immediately denies it. Pressuring the boy, the giant woman complains angrily about younger soldiers getting recruits before them. Next, the elf woman smilingly demands that the mage bring his new assistant to the hall. Frightened, Uldring questions the request, reminding her that the recruit is still in the protected military period. Covering her nose, the healer disgustedly asks what the mage just ate. Faced with his cheeky answer, the veteran attacks and asks if he really considers himself her equal. On the ground, Uldring agrees to bring the recruit immediately while complaining about the veteran's attitude. Walking gloomily toward the tent, The mage laments his own luck for living through that situation. Meanwhile, the recruit waits seated on her bed inside the military quarters tent. Opening the curtain, the mage tells the girl to get out while noticing how she dressed up. Smoking beside the girl, the mage asks if she uses herb, and Zinnia accepts upon order. Blowing out smoke, the master firmly warns the young woman never to start using it. Listening to her superior's advice, Zinnia reacts in silence, calling the man a big idiot. Next, Oldring explains about the summons and how military seniority makes a big difference there. The mage warns that the veterans are relentless and admits he won't be able to protect her from them. Finally, the man tells her to get used to it and humiliate herself, receiving confirmation from the recruit. Meanwhile, a hand pulls a mysterious ancient book from a shelf full of papers. Opening the pages, the person analyzes drawings and documents beside the thorny object. The text in the bestiary reveals that the item found is the shedskin of the demon eye. Handing over the item, Zinnia explains that the recruit found it on the march and asked to deliver it to Gate. Observing the document, Gate reads about armies attacking the demon realm in the distant past. With that, the text explains that the purple color indicates the demons are preparing invasions. Faced with this grave discovery, Gate mutters to himself that the situation is very terrible. Leaving in a hurry, the warrior orders preparations for battle and asks for the officer of the day. The small ally answers that Officer Moai is probably hiding and sleeping in the military quarters. Swearing out loud, Gate runs outside while his companion asks where he is going. During his run, the young man reflects that the officer in charge has disappeared and the elite are off duty. With that, the warrior concludes that the remaining higher-ranking veterans are next. Seated in the room, the veteran elf asks with a smile if the recruit knows who they are. Faced with the question, Swan hesitates for a moment before giving her formal answer. Next, the girl states that she recognizes the two advanced veterans from the manual's notes. Impressed by the knowledge, Jera asks how she knows and demands the official military salute. Hearing the veteran's demand, Swan widens her eyes and reacts immediately on the spot. Saluting, the young woman formally presents herself as the new dark mage of that military unit. Questioned by the veteran, Swan loudly recites all the daily passwords of that military unit. Watching the scene in silence, Gate keeps a very serious gaze directed at those veterans. Without any warning, the giant warrior forcefully grabs the recruit's hair from behind. Mox, the elf states that in the past she would have burned or ripped out all those loose strands. Raising her leg, the veteran warns that rookies are not allowed to wear such short skirts. Next, the elf questions how the girl joined the military with such low intelligence. Touching the young woman, the veteran criticizes the tight clothing and adds that she seems quite ignorant. Suddenly, Gate forcefully kicks open the door and enters the room, drawing everyone's eyes. The warrior calls out to the veterans, warning them that the demon eye can still be saved in time. He warns that the object will turn completely purple by nightfall, according to the ancient bestiary. Complaining about the interruption, the giant woman hits the instructor for entering and talking nonsense during training. Intervening in the fight, the elf asks for calm and inquires what is happening there. Lying on the ground, Gate reinforces the severe consequences if the item turns completely purple soon. Upon understanding the matter, the two veterans exchange malicious smiles at the exact same moment. Next, the veteran feigns doubt and questions the young man in a very ironic tone. Taunting the man, the elf states she cannot hear him and tells him to speak much louder. With mockery, the elf comments that the young man now hangs around girls around the camp. Right after, the warrior is kicked out of the place without having time to react. Next, the veterans order the young man to empty the trash and clean the military quarters. Kneeling on the ground, Gate laments that everyone, from officers to veterans, acts with complete contempt. Seeing the officer in charge sleeping, the warrior is outraged that everyone acts so calmly. Holding the pointed object firmly, Gate despairs upon realizing that time has run out. At that dawn, the wall guards complain about boredom while waiting for the shift change. To pass the time, the guard asks for a funny story, and his colleague offers to repeat another one. Next, the small soldier asks for a scary story to break the night's silence. Suddenly, the guard points behind his colleague in terror, unable to finish his sentence. Thinking it was just a joke, the small soldier laughs out loud and mocks the other. Unaware of the giant monster behind him, the guard continues laughing at his companion's joke. The narration explains that a fragile truce followed after the 100-Year War. As the bloodstains faded, weapons were finally set aside on the field. Because of this, while drinking at the base, the Federation soldiers forgot the vow they swore. Upon analyzing the list of military documents, the officer questions the reason for so many desertions. Furthermore, The final barrier was breached by demons without anyone noticing in time. Seeing this, the guard at the top of the wall blows the great horn to alert everyone. Next, the young man rushes forward in desperation while shouting, announcing the immediate presence of a demon. Shocked by the scene, the elf wonders how the creature managed to breach the barrier. At the top of the wall, the monstrous creature appears, facing the soldiers stationed there head-on. Facing the monster for the first time, the guards feel nauseous and cover their mouths. The narration reveals that the overwhelming pressure and despair cause most of them to vomit right there. The text explains that this species of demon belongs to a high tier of power. Leaping over the group, the creature unleashes an even more oppressive and terrifying murderous aura. Terrified by the attack, the young man grips his sword and orders the creature not to come any closer. In the next instant, the monster's claw strikes the ground near him with extreme violence. Then, the creature attacks violently, spilling blood and driving the soldiers back right there. Facing the recruit cornered on the wall, the demon roars loudly as it approaches to attack. Screaming in pain, the recruit staggers away while dropping his sword to the ground. Watching the critical scene, the warrior Gate grinds his teeth while gripping his sword tightly. Without hesitation, the warrior leaps high into the air with his sword raised against the creature. With his gaze fully focused on the enemy, he readies the blow to strike the monster. Next, the young man delivers a swift vertical slash that hits the creature's head. Struck full on by the attack, the demon roars loudly as blood spurts out right there. Even bleeding heavily from the cut on its head, the beast continues to growl in a deeply threatening manner. Landing on the ground with sword in hand, Gate maintains a combat stance. With a steady gaze, the warrior asserts that this is no illusion and represents reality. As the moon shines in the sky, the young man remains staring at the colossal creature in front of him. Reaching the top of the wall, the elf mage shouts in surprise upon seeing a real demon. From high up in the tower, the archers confirm secured positions and readiness to provide immediate support. With the encirclement formed, all the soldiers prepare to face the monster on the wall. Kneeling in terror, the young recruit trembles intensely as he tries to hold his spear tightly. Staring at the scene, Uldring fearfully asks what that thing in front of them could be. Right beside him, the mage trembles weakly while struggling to hold her magic staff. Worried, the young man asks his companion why he is shaking so much. Looking around, Gate states that they need to act immediately and report what happened later. Irritated, Uldring grumbles, asking where the other soldiers could be hiding at such a critical moment. Next, the master scolds the recruits and orders everyone to put on their scarves to breathe. Meanwhile, the creature remains motionless in place as a slimy puddle spreads across the ground. Observing the substance on the soil, Gate mutters to himself, identifying the presence of that dark swamp. The narration explains that the bestiary considers this creature dangerous, not just for its aggressiveness. The text reveals that the released mucus contaminates the soil, turning the place into demon territory. Ready to fight, Uldring warns that he will begin the incantation while drawing his allies' attention. With a stern look, the master shouts, demanding that the young recruit regain consciousness. At that moment, the deluded recruit appears wielding his spear and asks if it was his turn. Riding an exhausted horse, Nartz appears equipped with his armor to enter the battle. Aiming her bow with precision, the archer shouts, ordering the recruit to get out of the way. Before he can finish his sentence, Nartz is thrown far away by the beast's brutal attack. Amidst the chaos established on the wall, the young recruit remains paralyzed, unable to act. Seeing his companion fallen on the ground, Swan notes that even that boy tried to attack. With trembling hands, the girl wonders how someone like that could be a transcendent. While the young girl hesitates, the other allies hold their positions firmly against the colossal beast. With that, Gate recalls that eliminating the main body before the mucus hardens will dissipate everything. Charging forward quickly, the leader recalls that this kind of monster already has a combat strategy. The warrior explains that a recently molted monster's carcass still remains quite soft. Aiming with extreme precision, the young man directly attacks the vulnerable membrane of the beast's joint. With a focused gaze, Gate identifies the exact weak point located on the enemy's neck. Concentrating all his strength into the strike, he declares he will cut down the beast in a single motion. The impact of the attack hits the creature's neck, sending purple blood spurting through the air. Surprised by the result, the warrior wonders, unable to understand how the beast blocked the blow. In the next moment, Gate uses his sword to hold off the powerful counterattack coming from the monster. Stepping back with his sword, Gate observes that the creature managed to defend against the attack. Next, the warrior explains that protecting its neck is just a primitive survival instinct. With that, Gate laments the lack of a high-level swordsman to split the monster's attention. Suddenly, the warrior turns quickly upon noticing new magic surging at the location. Right after, dark vines wrap around the giant creature, binding its arms with full force. Seeing the scene, Uldring stammers that the monster is just big, but actually weak. Before the scene, the other soldiers shout, urgently asking what the master's orders are. From atop the tower, the young archer hastily demands that he give the orders quickly. At that moment, Uldring finally realizes he is the highest-ranking officer in command there. Taking the lead, the mage orders Morris to cast buffing and demands a total bombardment from everyone. Heeding the order, the gnome confirms and activates a buffing spell over the entire group. Next, the archers loose a rapid volley of arrows toward the monstrous creature. Several arrows hit the monster's arm, while the dark bindings tighten even further. Raising his staff, Uldring recites the spell's words to put the creature to sleep. Right after, the dark binding magic wraps around the monster to trap it in an eternal sleep. However, the monstrous creature thrashes violently, trying to break free from the magical chains. Desperate, the gnome screams that the beast is breaking loose and questions his area buffing. Seeing the danger, Uldring shouts in despair, telling the warrior to do something quickly. Holding his sword, the young man mutters, asking for just one more moment for the right timing. Impatient, the mage shouts, asking what he is doing and ordering him to attack before it escapes. At that moment, the monster uses its brute strength and begins snapping its bonds. Fixing his eyes on the target, the warrior hears his companion shout his name. Noticing the perfect opening in the monster's defense, Gate announces that this is the moment. Next, the warrior charges swiftly, delivering a powerful upward strike against the great beast. Concentrating all his strength, Gate openly declares that he will end this once and for all. Before the devastating impact, the guards watch the scene completely stunned atop the high wall. The sharp blade cuts deeply into the monster's flesh, severing its parts in a matter of seconds. With that, the creature's head is sliced off and flies high through the dark air. From atop the tower, the archers react in absolute shock as they witness the swift decapitation. Right beside them, the allies watch in silence as the combat comes to an end on the wall. With that, the beast's severed head spins through the air under the bright moonlight. Severely injured and covered in blood, Gate watches the battlefield while catching his breath. With his sword thrust into the ground, the young man confirms the successful elimination of the invading monster. Right after, silence takes over the high wall illuminated by the moonlit night. Suddenly, a heavy tremor coming from the top of the mountain catches everyone's attention. Amidst the darkness of the rocks, a large dark eye suddenly opens in that place. Next, a gigantic horned creature emerges, roaring and releasing its incredibly heavy aura. Right behind the beast, hundreds of demonic faces pile together, forming a truly terrifying mass. Glaring at the soldiers, the demon named Groton growls loudly as he prepares his next attack. As night fell, an urgent message flew toward the high walls of the great fortress. Feeling the object land on the desk, Commander Rebecca reacts in surprise while writing. She then analyzes the letter, wondering about the content sent the previous day. In the document, Gate apologizes for skipping protocol to warn about the demon invasion. Upon opening the attached package, the woman's eyes widen in shock as she recognizes the artifact. Given the gravity of the situation, the leader rushes to the High Officer's conference room. Pushing the door open forcefully, she interrupts the meeting, announcing an emergency. Upon entering the room, Rebecca stops in her tracks as she notices the glowing crystal sphere. Gathered around the artifact, the advisors state that the captain's arrival was perfect. Hearing the statement, the woman realizes that an abnormal communication was occurring through the magic sphere. The council explains that the transmission tower was not recording images and seemed to have expired. Pointing to the papers, the veteran states that the demon invasion had already been predicted. Furthermore, he admits he considered the bestiary's revelations to be mere baseless madness. The advisor confirms that the sphere's images prove the efficiency of the warrior's actions. With no time to lose, the superior orders the immediate advance of all military forces. Hesitant, the old advisor questions whether this exaggerated reaction might end up provoking an even greater conflict. Reacting to the remark, the other officer rants, stating that demons are merely pests to be exterminated. He then argues that the creatures have already invaded the fortress and demand an immediate response. Studying the map, the advisor points out that the attack is occurring in the Bloody Lands region of Grothan. The man then explains that the location is far from the demon race's main territory. With that, the officer suggests initially sending only 3 transcendents to carry out the infiltration mission. Faced with this deployment proposal, the old advisor joins his hands and calls for Captain Rebecca. The superior then asks the commander if she has any opinion on this strategic decision. On the wall, the little gnome asks about breaking the hierarchy, but Gate justifies the emergency. As they talk, the dark substance left by the monster continues to spread across the stones of the wall. Analyzing the ground, the warrior explains that the release swamp will soon begin to solidify. The young man adds that it will only be a matter of time before the demon army's forces emerge. The explanation reveals that infiltrating and eliminating the host body will destroy all connected entities. Faced with the facts, Gate concludes that the bestiary's information was correct about the threat. Gazing at the horizon, the little ally asks the instructor what their next step will be. Suddenly, an imposing voice orders an immediate advance, causing the little soldier to freeze in terror. Watching the illuminated horizon, Gate calmly remarks that the magic blackout had finally come to an end. Then, the historical text reinforces that the only acceptable choice had always been to kill or be killed. Climbing the stairs of the wall, the officer asks crossly what could have happened during the night. Exhausted, the man indignantly questions why that creature had freaked out after being so calm. Muttering against the fallen recruit, the superior orders the wounded man taken to the infirmary immediately. While resting, the two female veterans complain about the noise caused by the attack of a single invading demon. Observing the scene from above, Gate vents dejectedly about the bitter reality check of the military. Furious with the situation, the officer rants, demanding to know how they caused so much chaos without informing a superior. Next, the veteran demands that everyone clean the blood from the area because of the foul smell. As the heavy rain begins to fall, a strange sense of restlessness takes over the wall. Under the storm, Gate watches the scene, trying to understand the source of all that strange discomfort. In the face of darkness, the magic lantern remains lit atop the structure, illuminating the heavy storm. In the official document, the report records that the creature was successfully neutralized without leaving any casualties. Relaxed in his office, the officer celebrates the commander's absence to enjoy a peaceful military life. Observing the place in silence, Gate wonders if that really was the true reality. Right after, the female elf veteran coldly asks why they did that. Facing that scene in the quarters, the other female veteran questions if this situation is even real. Holding the wet clothes, Jera complains about the smell and orders everything to be gathered before the rain. Pressing the subordinate to the ground, the female veteran demands an answer while the recruit apologizes. Next, the girl scoffs at the lack of hot water and criticizes the newcomer's capability. Interrupting the argument, Gate reminds the female veteran that yesterday there was an emergency that is not yet resolved. Holding the young man's face, the giantess accuses him of arrogance for defeating a demon. Pressing the young man, the female warrior asserts that taking care of the laundry matters more than the demons. With her arms crossed, Jera complains about how the unit needs to reteach basic tasks. Given this, the narration reveals that such contempt was the true source of all the discomfort. The text explains that the lack of casualties made everyone ignore the gravity of the situation. Observing the area, Gate ponders to himself whether he should have let someone die earlier. Noticing his expression, the giant female veteran spots the young man's look and calls out to him. Suddenly, an officer shouts, ordering all personnel to report to the courtyard immediately. Facing the heavy rain, the female veteran asks if the roll call won't be held indoors. As they walk to the courtyard, the other recruits groan from exhaustion due to the sudden order received. Before the troops gathered in the rain, the officer announces he will skip the reports to declare decisions. With that, the narration explains that only the transcendent can enter the demon realm. Furthermore, unsheathing the special weapon activates magic functions that make breathing easier in the swamp. Next, the officer yells that the transcendent forces will be sent first on a secret mission. Continuing the speech, the commander orders the host to be eliminated and signaled with holy fire. Without hesitating, Gate intervenes, stating that sending only 3 warriors without support is a suicide mission. Facing the challenge, the officer shouts, asking if the young man was disobeying orders from superiors. Observing the scene, the elf notes that the warrior ignores boundaries to point out what is wrong. Without backing down, the young man insists they have no time and demands the order for a full advance. Ignoring the warning, the veteran praises the military spirit and claims to have total confidence in them. Next, the superior orders the cleanup and confirms the departure of the 3 at dawn. As the officer wraps up the military call, Gate maintains his dark gaze in light of the decision made. At the same time, the narration warns that the evolved creatures will breach the barrier later today. In a critical situation where every second counts, a small feather falls under the rain. Upon noticing the object falling from the sky, the young man looks up, searching for its origin. With that, the feather touches the young man's chest while he murmurs quite hesitantly. Next, the warrior turns around quickly upon sensing a presence approaching nearby. Suddenly, Commander Rebecca lands at the location in front of the men watching the scene. Approaching the young man, the officer stares at him with an extremely stern and quite direct gaze. Seeing her arrive, the warrior utters Captain Rebecca's name in a low tone. Right after, other winged soldiers land behind the commander to maintain a rigid formation. Startled by the surprise, the officer asks how she managed to return so suddenly. Analyzing the papers in her hand, Rebecca questions Moai if that was the report of the event. Trying to justify himself quickly, the man desperately begs the woman to let him explain everything. Lacking patience, the leader grabs the officer's face to shut him up at that very moment. Next, she delivers a violent blow to the subordinate, making the man groan loudly. Crumpling the document, Rebecca harshly declares that the guy wrote an entire soap opera there. Next, the woman questions if he thought the crystal tower was just for decoration. Furthermore, the commander severely asserts that detailed reports were not even necessary for that, because even without saying anything, she knows exactly who really fought and gave their all. With that, Rebecca adds that she also knows who tried to take all the glory unfairly. Next, the commander unrolls an official scroll with direct orders given by the main headquarters. Spreading her wings, the leader shouts loudly, demanding the attention of all forces. Furthermore, Rebecca announces she received emergency orders and warns it is not a drill. Before the troops, the woman declares that the order takes effect at that exact moment. With firmness, Rebecca orders all Federation units to equip themselves with full weaponry. While Gate watches with determination, the commander orders the immediate start of everyone's advance. The narration explains that the entire demon race remains connected through a single shared consciousness. Because of this, lesser entities can never act independently without orders from the main brain. Furthermore, the bestiary records prove that the demons have declared the official resumption of war. Analyzing the crystal, the elder warns that the armistice was temporary, and this opportunity is unique. With a stern look, Rebecca stresses that the Federation will not get another chance if they miss this moment. As heavy rain falls, the Federation forces remain gathered before the imposing walls. Next, Rebecca warns that the perimeter is in danger, and they cannot wait for reinforcements. At the same time, a recruit laments that the off-duty officers will take too long to return. Frightened in the rain, the two soldiers hold their spears while talking about the great danger. Suddenly, the warrior begins coughing heavily as he is covered by the strange dark smoke. Seeing the scene, the guards are shocked to notice that the swamp has already invaded the territory. Faced with the advancing mist, the leader promptly orders everyone to put on their face masks. Stepping onto the slimy ground, the recruits advance, complaining loudly about the disgusting texture of the place. Next, the dark swamp begins bubbling intensely near the feet of the apprehensive soldiers. Suddenly, a monstrous creature surges from the depths of the swamp, attacking the soldier by surprise. Faced with the unexpected attack, the soldier groans in pain as the creature sinks its ferocious claws. Seeing the beast emerge from the swamp, the recruits shout, warning that it is a Gij. Faced with the confusion, the commander forcefully orders the infantry to assume a square formation. Quickly, the soldiers align their shields and spears, creating a gleaming magic barrier against the danger. With impressive speed, the winged leader descends from the sky and strikes the creature with force. Executing a precise swoop, Rebecca slices off the tip of the monster's snout in one motion. The precise cut severs the piece of skin, sending purple blood splashing violently through the air. Right after, Rebecca warns that cutting the beast's nose will cause it to lose its way. Following the command, the warriors advance together and cut off the snouts of the multiple monsters. With their sense of smell impaired by the hit, the creatures begin spinning aimlessly in circles. Suddenly, additional massive monsters emerge from the dark swamp, catching the soldiers completely off guard. Faced with the new threat, the recruit shouts loudly, warning of the presence of two wargals. Observing the enemies, Rebecca realizes those creatures plan to invade the fortress and shorten the time. Without wasting time, the commander orders the winged squad to attack the monsters on the left. At the same time, she commands the archers to unleash a rain of arrows on the right. As the attack begins, the massive stone creature leaps violently beneath the heavy rain. Faced with the impact, the guards yell that the line is falling back and tell everyone to hold their ground. With that, the monster lets out a terrifying roar while raising its huge clawed arm. Next, the beast's brutal strike hits the ground right in front of the young mage. Retreating in haste, the elf mage lets out a loud shout as he tries to channel his magic. Right after, several sharp spikes of pure energy emerge from the dark waters of the swamp. To protect his ally, Gate leaps over his companion and delivers a powerful direct blow. Next, he tells him he will handle the monster and orders him to apply the mist into the hole. Hearing the order, the elf mage hesitantly replies that he already intended to do just that. With that, Uldring drives his staff into the ground and recites the incantation to expand magic. While casting the spell, he wonders if the officer would really send only 3 recruits. Right after, a massive wave of energy expands and covers the entire field. Observing the enemy, Gate states that dealing with the beast becomes simple once you understand its pattern. The warrior recalls that the monster usually repels and blocks any long-range attack. With that, he swiftly charges forward to cut down the creature in close combat. Gathering all his strength, the warrior claims he will settle everything with a single strike. Then, Gate delivers a devastating attack and warns that he will cut down the enemies without hesitation. Right above, 2 swords cross in midair, sparking a bright flash before the troops. With that, the winged warriors dive rapidly from the sky toward the advancing monster. Attacking together, the duo strikes a cross-shaped slash onto the giant beast. After the attack, the soldier announces the elimination of the monsters and the advance through the perimeter. Then, the ally warns everyone that beyond that mark lies demon territory. As the rain falls, the young elf silently vents his frustration over having done nothing. Right after, the officer instructs the group to focus as they march swiftly toward the land. Watching the movement, the veteran elf quietly complains while clutching her arm, injured in battle. Channeling healing magic, the girl complains about the risk of ending up with scars on her skin. Upon hearing the winged soldier order the fighters healed, the young elf immediately apologizes. Meanwhile, the giant warrior remains completely still before the monster that emerges at the site. With a single devastating punch, the woman crushes the rocks and destroys the surrounding enemy. Right after, the veteran grumbles in frustration as she observes the debris scattered across the area. Irritated, the veteran reprimands his subordinates for allowing the enemy advance, while the recruit apologizes. Flying above the area, the winged warrior analyzes the troops and comments that the composition isn't bad. However, she warns that the swamp's effects and energy expenditure are lowering their stats. Even far from the command center, Rebecca considers that victory depends entirely on the power of the Transcendence. Suddenly, a scout points ahead and shouts a warning that she spotted the bloody land. At that moment, the rearguard guards panic and shout that demons are advancing. Facing the threat, the officer urgently commands the mages to activate the tree sanctuary. Obeying the order, the mages join their staves and summon a glowing sphere of magical protection. Then, a massive luminous shield expands across the battlefield, granting defense to the soldiers. From atop the barrier, the commander firmly demands that they block the approaching demons. As they try to invade the area, the creatures howl in pain while being repelled by the magic barrier. Looking back, Rebecca calls out Gate's name, and he promptly responds, confirming his presence. The commander warns that the sanctuary square won't hold for long, and the young man confirms he knows. Then, she orders all remaining energy channeled to the Transcendence while the others defend. When Rebecca asks if the Transcendents are ready, Gate and the others confirm with determination. With the confirmation given, the group of Transcendents advances and officially enters the bloody territory. Upon entering the location, the girl comments that the darkness makes it impossible to see anything. Then, the leader activates the legendary weapon's function, releasing a protective crimson mist. Seeing this, the warrior explains that the artifact's defensive function was successfully activated. Holding the blade, Gate warns that its light will serve as a lantern and tells everyone to follow. Walking right behind, the girl responds hesitantly, while the small companion mutters quite nervously. With his eyes sharply focused on the path, Gate considers that this battle will be extremely decisive. Then, the young man tells himself that he must finish this entire fight alone. The narration explains that the warrior led his inexperienced subordinates into the dense darkness. Observing the silence, the small ally asks if there are no demons inside the bloody territory. The text reveals that this territory is the host's chamber, where no one enters without permission. At that moment, a sudden step comes to a halt on the stone debris along the path. From the deep shadows of the place, the monstrous figure emerges, revealing its glowing eye and sharp teeth. Then, the text concludes that most hosts remain completely alone in that place. Noticing the threatening presence above, Gate and his companions react instantly. Trembling heavily, the gnome comments that the creature is only a little bigger than a wargle. Suddenly, the stone structure begins to crack as a dark energy spreads out. Right after, the giant monster expands its body and releases an even greater pressure. Before the group, the creature reveals itself to be terribly colossal over the terrain. Shouting loudly, the small gnome warns that the creature's size has simply doubled on the spot. Then, the monster's sharp claws strike the stones and violently shatter the ground. Seeing the imminent danger, the recruit calls out loudly for Gate as everyone takes a step back. Without giving time to react, the creature swings its giant arm in a devastating attack. As he watches the strike coming, the warrior shows a confident smile and adjusts his stance. With extreme speed, the warrior takes the monster's direct impact using his greatsword. Behind his blade, the young man stares at the enemy with a fixed, determined gaze. In response to the block, the beast snarls loudly as dark energy wraps around its horns. The bestiary reveals that the demon named Grothan represents merely the toe joint. From above, the colossal creature threatens everyone, firmly declaring that they will all die there. Right after, the monster flexes its muscular body while letting out an extremely terrifying roar. With the force of the attack, the beast knocks the warriors back as everyone reacts in shock. Kneeling on the ground, the allies groan in pain, while Gate tries to maintain his stance. Overcome by panic, the young man cries, saying he feels violent pain and begging to be saved. The narration explains that this cowardly reaction was nothing more than their primitive instinct for survival. Seeing the widespread panic, Gate shouts angrily, demanding that his companions pull themselves together immediately. Meanwhile, the beast attacks with extreme violence, tearing apart the rocky ground with its claws. Faced with the force of the impact, large rocks begin to plummet from the walls all across the cave. Acting quickly, the leader retreats, pulling his companions away from the danger of the falling rocks. Gate wonders indignantly if he will really have to face that terrible monster alongside those incompetents. The young man remembers the order to eliminate the host and light the holy fire to signal. In silence, the young man curses those incompetent officers for giving such an insane order. Taking a deep breath, Gate decides to set his anger aside and focus solely on defeating the enemy. Adjusting his posture, the warrior asserts that the beast is just an evolved wargle and he will manage to beat it. Firmly, Gate orders no one to retreat and commands everyone to climb onto the enormous creature. As he leaps toward the monster, the warrior instructs his companions to target its vital spots. Immediately following, the blade strikes the beast's body, causing an extremely violent impact. Upon realizing the result of the strike, Gate's eyes widen, seized by great surprise. Faced with the shock, the force of the collision hurls the young man far away against the rocks. Falling violently to the ground, the young man collides with the debris, creating a thick cloud of smoke. Coughing up blood, Gate laments that not even perfect force and timing could cut through the joint. Observing the weapon stuck in the ground before him, the young man wonders how he will ever defeat it. Staring at the blade, Gate notices the details engraved on the surface of his broadsword. In his memories, his former companion appears smiling and asks what he thought of it. The friend excitedly adds that the artwork was drawn by Leo from the 3rd Military Quarters. Returning to the present, Gate mutters to himself as he remembers the supply of votes. Staring into space, the warrior's eye widens in outrage as he deduces what really happened. Looking at the sword embedded near the skull, he wonders if his companion had deserted. Suddenly, dark energy and skulls emerge from the ground around the embedded great weapon. The narration explains that for a host accustomed to massacres, battle works quite differently. Because of this, a transcendent without any real combat experience ends up facing great difficulties in the fight. In reality, those warriors served as mere toys to relieve the accumulated boredom of the terrible monster. With that, the monstrous creature flexes its gigantic muscles, preparing to unleash another attack. Immediately after, a devastating strike causes the ceiling to collapse, raining rocks down on everyone around. Under the impact of the explosion, the companions are hurled far away, landing violently upon the accumulated debris. Fallen on the cave floor, the girl and her ally cough heavily as they try to catch their breath. Meanwhile, the beast watches from a distance as the warrior Gate stands next to his embedded sword. Without relent, the monster leaps violently, coming down heavily to crush the young man on the spot. Next, the creature unleashes multiple brutal strikes against the ground, destroying everything around it. Seeing that terrible scene, the young recruit calls out for the veteran Gate, fearing the worst for the young man. Facing the danger, the girl gathers her strength and begins to recite a powerful magic spell. Right after, chains of dark magic envelop the monster, trying to trap it in an eternal slumber. The narration explains that magic requires just as much concentration as archery and swordsmanship. Because of this, casting spells while consumed by fear can completely compromise their effectiveness. With that, the dark magic fails completely, and the monster breaks the chains without difficulty. Free from its restraints, the giant creature lets out a terrifying roar while glaring at the two allies. Observing the enemy's strength, the gnome laments that they will never be able to win that fight. Immediately after, the giant beast leaps from above, thrusting its sharp claws with extreme violence. Appearing quickly at the scene, Gate uses his great sword to block the monster's attack. The warrior reveals that he intended to cut the enemy, but its hide is too tough. Without hesitating, the young man leaps into the air and positions his weapon above the enemy's head. Upon delivering the blow, the blade collides with the creature, generating a violent impact. With the force of the shock, Gate is thrown far away and slams violently into the rocks. Fallen on the ground, the warrior admits in surprise that the gap in power between them is massive. He explains that Groton's weak spot needs to collide exactly with the strong point of the sword. The young man concludes that this must happen for even a slim chance of victory to exist. Standing up, Gate declares to his companions that everyone's situation there is quite critical. Next, the warrior stares at the pair and asks if they intend to die in that place. The leader firmly adds that everyone will die if the pair does not provide immediate support. Swan compliments him by warning that the holding forces outside will also end up destroyed. With that, the young girl orders everyone to focus solely on figuring out how to defeat that monster. Next, Swan demands that they maintain that focus relentlessly until the end. Looking back, the young man questions what would be the worst thing if they end up dying. Facing the master's words, spoken in a resigned manner, the girl finally regains her composure. Swan reflects in silence that there is only one spell capable of binding that demon. Recalling her old notes, the young girl remembers the earth-summoning magic called Karastra. However, this spell loses its strength as it gets farther from the ground. Therefore, the magic needs to be activated when the monster's head touches the ground. Watching the fight, Swan questions how such a massive creature moves so fast. Facing that stalemate in battle, the recruit remains in absolute silence, seeking a useful solution. Suddenly, the young girl ponders that they need to formulate a new hypothesis for the attack. Swan deduces that by increasing the beast's inertia, the momentum to be controlled will be much greater. Next, the girl asks Morris if he can cast a buffing spell on just one of the monster's legs. With no time to lose, the recruit demands haste, stating that they have no other option available. Suddenly, the giant creature leaps high into the air, driving its entire body downward. Out of options, the gnome raises his staff, declaring that he no longer cares about anything. Next, the small mage activates the buffing spell directly on the specified leg. With that, the monster's leg receives the magic and begins to glow intensely in the air. Right behind her companion, Swan raises her staff while preparing to cast her magic. Faced with the sudden shift in weight, the great beast loses its balance and plummets in a spin. Completely surprised by the uncontrolled impact, the demon crashes down headfirst. With overwhelming force, the creature hits the ground headfirst, destroying the surrounding rocks. Taking advantage of the exact moment of the fall, the recruit shouts, announcing the start of her magic. Quickly, dark magic emerges and binds the beast to the ground with powerful purple tendrils. Seeing the creature completely immobilized, Gate's eyes widen in astonishment at the efficiency of the plan. Gritting his teeth with determination, the master concentrates his energy and prepares the final attack. Meanwhile, the young girl remembers the time she watched her master's training through the window. On that occasion, Gate was lifting his greatsword, repeatedly practicing the basic combat stance. Watching the slashes, the recruit wondered if such a simple technique would actually work. With his face covered in blood, Gate resolutely announces stance number 1. Fixing his firm gaze on the enemy, the warrior prepares to deliver the powerful blow. Next, the young man raises his greatsword high over the completely trapped monster. At that moment, Morris decides to spend all his remaining mana to cast a powerful buffing spell. With that, the total buffing magic envelops the young man's arms and weapon. Impressed by the support received, Gate takes back his previous insults and invokes the standard technique. Calling out to his companions, the master acknowledges that Morris and Swan are of great value. Next, the leader declares that they are top tier and executes the basic form. Watching the scene closely, the two companions react in awe while maintaining total focus. With a devastating strike, the blade cuts through the monster's neck and beheads the giant beast. With the monster's severed head on the ground, Gate stands catching his breath. Severely injured and covered in blood, the warrior tries to catch his breath after the combat. Watching the scene in amazement, the recruit comments in surprise that he actually managed to defeat the monster. Right beside him, the small ally stammers in shock, seeing the terrible creature eliminated. Before his deeply impressed companions, Gate remains silent as the dust settles at the sight. Suddenly, a special glowing organ emerges from the remains of the defeated monster. Noticing the object, the warrior's eyes widen as he feels a strange urge surging. Without hesitation, he plunges his dagger into the creature's flesh to extract that special part. The text reveals that the piece obtained is a rare rib of a quite powerful demon. The narration highlights that all transcendents feel an uncontrollable urge to devour that item. Overcome by instinct, Gate bites into the monster's flesh with extreme veracity right on the spot. Watching the scene impressed, his companions swallow hard as they follow the warrior's actions. The narration explains that the energy of that piece awakens a strong sensory pull in the chosen ones. After swallowing all the food, the young man lets out a sigh as the text describes this impulse. Then, the absorbed energy spreads through Gate's body, cooling all his organs. With a smile on his face, the warrior explains that this is not a simple matter of digestion. Grasping the hilt of his sword tightly, the young man states that it is actually a union. Then, Gate strikes the air with his greatsword, creating a powerful wave of wind. Faced with that demonstration, the girl and the small ally shout in complete astonishment at the scene. The narration explains that the highly active proteins absorbed by the warrior strengthen his entire body. With this, the text reveals that the consumed energy amplified his physical power to the extreme limit. Furthermore, the narration highlights that Gate's combat power tripled after that moment. Looking at his companions, the master warns that only the transcendents know this information and asks for their attention. Next, he mentions the shared wave between them, and the two confirm that they felt it too. The leader warns that future battles will be brutal, and the reward will depend on their contribution in fight. With this, Gate declares that information about rewards must be kept strictly within the group. The warrior states that this is the rule for them to survive, and asks if he made himself clear to them. Upon hearing the direct order, both companions answer loudly, confirming their understanding of the request. Observing the leader, the girl reflects that his broad vision doesn't even seem like that of a human. Finally, the narration reveals that Gate already knew he would face challenges beyond battles on the front line. The narration explains that wars are not won solely with swords and spears on the battlefields. Furthermore, the text reveals that the worst political games happen hidden behind desks. With this, Gate perfectly perceived the cowardice of his superiors trying to steal the achievements of the transcendents. Meanwhile, the names of those who bled in combat would completely disappear from all records. At that moment, a demonic creature emerges, roaring loudly near all the soldiers present. Nearby, the veteran observes its approach and calmly states that it was already too late. Faced with the imminent threat, the man silently wonders if he would end up dying like that. Recalling the past, the warrior invites his colleague for a drink, but he refuses because of his daughter. In the memory, the woman scolds the elf for hanging out with him, but his friend defends their friendship. With tears in his eyes, the old soldier concludes that that world was full of great regrets. Suddenly, the veteran releases an impressive force as smoke spreads around. With a single move, the old warrior pulverizes the monster, leaving the soldiers completely stunned. Observing the unbelievable scene, the elves state in astonishment that the demons are being utterly annihilated. With the end of the fight, the officer announces that the situation is over and orders the barrier deactivated. As the swamp begins to disappear, a small plant emerges from the local purified soil. Seeing the plant, the captain explains that this species confirms the absence of demons nearby. With that, the soldiers celebrate in relief, noticing that the local air became clean instantly. Suddenly, heavy footsteps begin to echo as a mysterious figure walks out of the darkness. Hearing the noises, the soldier turns around startled and notices the group approaching quickly. Next, Gate emerges victorious from the cave, carrying the monster's head alongside his companions. Observing the group's return, Rebecca reflects that she was already fully prepared for the worst scenario. The narration recalls that the members who fought in the initial surprise attack reacted with great agility. With that, the text highlights that this victory resulted from the effort led by the warrior Gate. With a faint smile, the captain surprisingly acknowledges that those youths really managed to fulfill the mission. Faced with the achievement, the crowd of soldiers begins to celebrate and cheer in a very loud voice. When approached by the leader, the girl complains about the foul odor while trying to step away from him. Observing his companions, the elf mage grumbles quietly while putting a leaf in his mouth. Irritated by the attitude, Rebecca scolds her subordinate and orders him to check the troop count. As they walk together, the warrior complains quietly about the superior's exaggerated attitude at that moment. Next, he states with conviction that he could easily destroy the enemies if he entered the lands. Observing the recruits, Gate ponders that those soldiers have never faced the real threat up close. Next, the youth realizes that the troop still hasn't understood the danger of the demons. The narration reinforces that the Federation didn't understand the gravity of that critical situation at the camp. Furthermore, the text highlights that this moment would directly affect the kingdom's own survival. At the temporary camp, the officer orders the immediate start of repairs on the fortress walls. Right after, the official report confirms 11 injured soldiers and 4 registered deaths in that clash. Readying her combat bow, the girl laments that the sacrifices have become completely inevitable. Right after, a volley of arrows hits the creatures that were trying to advance into the area. From atop the wall, the archer warns about the need to build defensive positions. Next, the girl adds that mastering those bloody lands will not end the military combat. While working in the temporary quarters, the young man is called by the officer to follow him. Faced with the order received, the man suggests sending the youths, claiming severe knee pain. Without listening, the officer demands speed while the veteran transports stones to the border. Observing the movement, Jaga goes silent upon seeing Gady carrying a huge stone by himself. In shock at such a display of strength, the veteran stares at the young warrior without understanding. Impressed, Jaga asks if the stone isn't heavy, but Gate replies that it is bearable. The recruit suggests that the stone might be light, but the veteran tells the girl to try lifting it. Observing the strength shown, the recruit wonders if that meant being a true transcendent. Looking at the ruins, Gate reflects that the entire continent belonged to the Federation before the Great Attack. Suddenly, a loud military salute echoes through the place, making the young warrior turn around. Inspector Norman introduces himself by saluting and announces important messages coming from HQ. Crossing his arms, the veteran complains about the interruption and asks what the urgent matter is. The inspector reports that the unveiling of the new weapons for the next class has been completed. Surprised by the news, Jaga comments that the process happened much faster than usual. All around, several veterans grow anxious, hoping their direct successors finally arrive at the camp. Observing everyone's reaction, Gate remains thoughtful while analyzing the behavior of his military companions. The veteran demands a detailed report, and the inspector responds promptly, confirming the received request. Next, the unveiling details the manifestation of the sacred weapons emerging amidst glowing crimson clouds. The document presents the legendary Gauntlet of Rage and warns about the approach of the troops. With a frightened look, the inspector announces loudly that the confirmed troops are giants. Upon hearing the news, Jaga celebrates the update, stating that the arrival of the giants is excellent. With that, the veteran chuckles quietly among his companions while planning his next military steps. Displaying a dark smile, Jaga celebrates that his direct subordinates are finally arriving at the camp. Cracking his gauntlets, the warrior states that whoever it is should already consider themselves dead. With an insane look, the young man adds that he will make sure to show them hell itself. Facing the gathered crowd, the officer demands full attention and orders everyone to shout much louder. While watching the troop of giants, the veteran commands the cheer, demanding triple the volume. Next, recruit number 8, known as a combat champion, takes center stage. Shortly after, the presenter introduces recruit number 1, called the Great Iron Hero. Observing the presentation, the instructor considers pompous titles useless in times of war. Furthermore, Gate wonders why a transcendent has returned to the recruitment center. Worried about the situation, the little gnome asks if the master will really return to the main headquarters. Given the received order, the superior orders Gate to act as an instructor until the giants arrive. The veteran adds that the barracks are more comfortable and asks for dedication until the end of this class. Understanding the intention behind the command, the young man silently agrees and accepts the mission. Upon leaving the place, Gate states he will comply with the orders and says goodbye to begin the task. Looking back, the warrior instructs his little ally to practice everything he was taught. Facing direct instruction, the boy energetically responds, confirming he will follow the master's order exactly. Analyzing the training document, the instructor begins the scheduled preparations for the first day of class. With that, the officer calls the next recruit and orders him to step forward. With a shout, the veteran demands total attention from all the recruits gathered at the location. Next, the officer announces immediate physical exams due to the urgent situation in the military camp. The officer explains that one of those present will draw the legendary weapon to become a transcendent. Upon hearing about the artifact, the recruits whisper among themselves, thoroughly impressed by the revelation. In addition, the officer instructs the others to honor the pride of the giant race. Observing the scene, Gate notes that Jaga trained hard to deliver a flawless presentation. Next, Gate finds the veteran Drenine completely despondent, asking to be killed on the spot. Panicking, the cook cries, complaining that the giant's exaggerated appetite will drive him to death. Grabbing the warrior, the cook begs to go to war and escape that terrible routine. Right after, the officer in charge drags the cook back while Gate watches in silence. Outside, the officers order the recruits to head inside for physical exams. Next, the recruits gather before the board to check the posted physical results. Analyzing the grades, the soldiers conclude that the contest has come down to just 2 candidates. With that, the body measurements highlight the impressive height and weight of the 2 main recruits. Next, the strength test confirms recruit number 1's advantage over his rival. Next, the stone movement report confirms recruit number 1's victory. Analyzing the result, Titan considers both to be at practically the same strength level. On the other hand, Goliath is remembered for being the open-weight continental champion. Observing the two, the other recruits comment extensively on who will win this grand historical duel. As the comments spread, the young man observes the activity around him in absolute silence. Upon hearing his name mentioned, Goliath merely instructs his peer to drop the subject. However, the young man silently asserts that his level is far superior to that guy. At that moment, Titan walks firmly through the room toward where the recruits were talking. Approaching, the young man extends his bandaged hand, politely greeting the other. With a calm gaze, Titan directly asks his rival if he is recruit Goliath. Holding the extended hand, the recruit merely confirms the received question rather hesitantly. Displaying a dark smile, Goliath declares to his rival that he is very pleased to meet him. At that very moment, the young man squeezes his rival's hand with absurd force. Feeling the violent grip, Titan reacts immediately upon noticing the intention behind that gesture. Maintaining the grip, Goliath scoffs, asking if it's worth making money by taking such a beating. Irritated by the pain of the grip, Titan swears at his rival, demanding that he let him go immediately. Mockingly laughing, Goliath notes that the young man handles the intense pain of that grip well. Suddenly, another recruit intervenes to break up the fight and questions the provocation on the first day. Threatening his rival, Goliath tells the young man not to show off and promises to crush him soon. Looking to the side, Titan murmurs that the situation would be quite different inside the cage. Walking away mockingly, Goliath just laughs out loud while ignoring his rival's provocation. Next, the young man calls his teammates and decides to walk away from there. Beside him, recruit number 15 criticizes the displayed behavior and the other guy's terrible personality. Then, Baba recognizes his classmates' fights and asks for an autograph in an unusual way. Laughing at the situation, the guy mocks his rival and encourages Titan to destroy him during combat. Upon hearing the suggestion, the young man remains thoughtful as he reflects on the fight in the trenches. As they walk together, Baba keeps talking endlessly, and Titan notices just how much he talks. Outside, the officer in charge asks if anyone needs to exchange their uniform right now. Analyzing the files, Gate comments in surprise that no giant recruit asked for a size change. Next, the veteran remembers that Moai gave special attention to preparing this class's uniforms. The officer in charge explains that humans and dwarves are not essential and should wear whatever clothes are available. As night falls over the camp, the officers shout, ordering a total blackout. Lying in the tent, the recruits quietly complain about how cramped the sleeping bags are. Unable to fall asleep, a boy whispers that he is awake because it is his first night. Then, his classmate suggests counting to 100, but warns that it gives you a headache. Hearing his classmate, Titan thinks the young man just seems like a very spoiled kid. Suddenly the curtain opens, and a voice calls for recruit number 1 to step out. Upon hearing the call, the young man gets up from his sleeping bag and confirms his presence. Watching him leave, Goliath wonders if that is nothing more than blatant privilege. As he steps out of the tent, the young man quietly curses the classmate he had fought with. Next, the scene shows the illuminated structure where the officers were waiting for the young man's arrival. Inside the venue, Titan signs the document while Moai instructs him to write anything on the paper. The paper displays the recruit's signature along with a message wishing the officer in charge best wishes. Next, the officer warns that here he is just a recruit, and Titan acknowledges the command. Firmly, the young man declares for the honor of the giants that he will fully dedicate himself to military training. Upon hearing the advice about getting along, Titan firmly confirms that he got the message. Then, the young man salutes and sincerely thanks the superior officers for their guidance. Watching the recruit leave, the veterans praise the young man's polite and sensible behavior. However, noticing the young man's dark look, the veteran takes back his previous praise. As they walk in the darkness, 2 soldiers complain about having to escort the recruits during the night. Upon entering the facility, the guards order recruit number 1 to change quarters. Already settled inside his new quarters, young Titan remains drinking his beverage in silence. Bothered by the delay, the guard hurriedly demands that the young man move faster. Without looking at the soldier, Titan quietly murmurs that those insignificant guys act so superior. Hearing the murmur, the guard immediately turns around and angrily asks what he said. With a completely calm expression, the young man simply answers, saying he didn't say anything. Dissatisfied with the answer, the guard approaches Storming and orders him to repeat what he said. Suddenly, Titan rises up, imposing his great height, and shouts loudly that he didn't say anything. Unleashing all his fury into the room, the young man continues shouting with full force without backing down. Terrified by the uproar, the guards cover their ears and ask if the young man has lost his mind. Then, Titan insults the guards, saying they are weak, broke, and completely insignificant. With a furious glare, the young man adds that those half-breed beggars should know their place. Staring at the soldiers, Titan challenges them, asking what the hell they plan to do against him. Outraged by the attitude, the guard yells, asking if the recruit has lost his mind with such insubordination. Without hesitating, Titan raises his arms and grabs both guards by the neck at the same time. Lifting the pair into the air, the giant taunts them, telling them to speak up or go ahead and stab him. Then, the young man reveals that he hates military life and asks to be sent to prison. Right after, the young man brutally slams both guards onto the floor of the facility. Imposing over the fallen guards, Titan remains standing while the two tremble on the ground. Then the door slams shut while the recruit curses at the fallen guards. The next day, news spreads through the camp, and a veteran asks about Titan. Irritated by the situation, the officer complains that he is being sworn at because of the guards. Pointing at the pair, the veteran questions why they show so much envy toward giants. Then he scolds the pair, asking if they have an inferiority complex against giants. The narration explains that giants hold great military value due to their unique racial traits. With a smirk, Titan tells the guard to get lost and receives immediate confirmation. Approaching the other recruit, the young man asks what he is doing while laughing. With a dark look, Titan comments to himself that things are going to get very interesting. While looking at the wall, the recruit wonders if Instructor Gate is okay at the camp. Upon entering the military mess hall, the giant ends up hitting his head hard against the upper frame. Then, the giant asks for more food, but the cook refuses, telling the recruit to leave. Without hesitating, the giant steps up and demands that the cook hand over the large ladle. Grabbing the utensil, the recruit serves his own meal in an extremely generous portion. Looking at his full plate, the giant comments on the ingredients while being called a pig. Curious, the instructor asks about the accumulation of cobwebs on the giants' heads. Then Gate comments on the disadvantages of height, while the recruit explains their evolution. At the table, the recruit asks his companion if the instructor really beheaded those terrible monsters. With that, the recruit questions the leader's mid-tier rank and analyzes the social hierarchy. While Gate eats, the soldier doubts the benefits of a transcendent, and his peer snaps back. Worried about the future, the two recruits debate whether the pension will actually be paid properly. Suddenly, another soldier approaches, cursing at the pair and telling them to try becoming transcendents themselves. Then, the guy slams his food tray hard onto the table, startling everyone. Brushing it off, Titan demands that his peers clean up the mess before leaving. Frightened by the guy's behavior, the recruits look at each other, not understanding what just happened. Then, one of the soldiers grumbles in annoyance while watching the boy walk away from the table. Gently, Goliath steps in and says he will collect the trays, leaving his peer deeply grateful. When asked about being naive, the recruit simply replies with a smile that helping out is a good thing. Watching his peer, Titan wonders to himself which region that unusual accent could be from. The next day, battalion training consists of throwing large pillars against the cliff wall. In front of the troops, the officer explains that everyone needs to hit the carved demon drawing. Then, the instructor directs them to perform the exercise exactly as recruit number 1 demonstrated. From atop the cliff, the instructor warns that falling off will result in certain death. Right after, the female instructor shouts that it came close and questions why no one is hitting the target. The overall failure, the officer calls on recruit number 8 to get ready immediately. Receiving the order to throw, the giant hurls the heavy wooden log with force. In the next instant, the pillar strikes right in the center of the target with a devastating impact. Impressed by the demonstration, the other recruits comment in astonishment that it seemed completely impossible. After the successful throw, Goliath stands with his arms crossed, wearing a very confident smile. Praising the good throw, his companion asks which region Goliath's accent comes from. The recruit explains that he came from the north and playfully asks if his accent sounds attractive. Questioned about the northern plague, Goliath proudly states that his tribe is holding strong. Then, the giant mockingly comments that only inferior humans succumb to diseases. Watching the result of the test, Titan simply declares in silence that it seemed quite adequate. Right after, the officer calls recruit number 15, and Baba promptly answers the call. Upon receiving the direct order to prepare, the giant lifts the heavy pillar to hurl it. With a swift movement, Baba violently launches the object against the mountain wall. However, the throw misses the main target completely and plunges straight into the vast abyss. Irritated by the failure, the female officer questions if the recruit isn't even going to try to hit the target. With that, the soldiers comment that only Goliath and Titan managed to hit the carved target. Watching the other recruits, Titan wears a smirking grin and mutters, calling them all idiots. Then the officer orders Baba to sing a song before returning to the tent. Without hesitating, the giant begins to sing an emotional song dedicated to his dear mother. Annoyed by his pitch, the soldiers throw rocks, complaining that the song ruined the mood. Watching that pitiful scene, Titan merely whispers to himself that it was all quite boring. Meanwhile, on the other side of the wall, someone complains that the situation was completely unfair. Then, the soldier gets irritated and complains that Moai doesn't trust their words. Hearing his comrade, the other guard vents his anxiety about the giants there. Suddenly, Titan appears at the doorway and mocks them, saying the guards were having a meeting. Then, the recruit asks with a laugh why they haven't sent him to prison yet. Faced with that attitude, the guard curses at the recruit while trying to face the giant head-on. Walking with his load, Gate grumbles that the other guy should mind his own business. Suddenly, the warrior stops in his tracks, surprised to hear a noise coming from the side. Looking between the buildings, he spots the giant sitting near tied-up guards. Completely shirtless and injured, the two guards remain bound in silence before the young man. Sitting on the wooden bench, Titan wipes his neck with a towel, maintaining total silence. In the quarters, the recruit asks if that instructor really decapitated the monsters Wurgle and Grothan. Hearing about the incredible feats, Titan wears a dark smile, deeply interested in the revelation. Standing at the entrance, Gate asks what they are doing there and why they are naked. Noticing his presence at the door, the guard screams loudly, cursing Gate for all of it. Paying no attention to the shouts, the giant just wipes his own neck with the towel. Then, Titan steps forward and comments that he has heard a lot about Instructor Gate. Reaching out his hand, the giant introduces himself and states that he intends to join the Transcendents. Faced with the introduction, the young man remains silent, keeping his serious gaze on the giant. Right after, the giant takes the young man's hand, applying a very firm grip. While maintaining the firm grip, the giant tries to gauge the true strength of the Transcendent there. Even applying all his strength, the giant notices that the young man remains motionless before him. In silence, the recruit wonders why the other shows no reaction at all. Staring at the giant calmly, Gate asks directly what he is doing at that moment. Keeping his intent gaze on the recruit, the instructor begins to question his goal there. Then, the young man squeezes back, asking if that was what he was trying to do. Pressed by the force of the grip, the giant's eyes widen, completely unable to understand anything there. Unable to bear the violent grip, Titan opens his mouth and screams in pain there. Faced with that scream of pain, the instructor demonstrates the overwhelming difference in power between them. Baffled by the force received, Titan wonders what kind of man he was dealing with. Forced to his knees, the recruit asks himself in disbelief if this was actually real. With a dark glare, Gate orders the young man to keep doing what he was doing before. Gritting his teeth from the pain, Titan desperately begs him to let go of his hand. As the recruit screams in agony, Gate commands him to keep showing off all his strength. Pinned tightly to the ground, the giant begs once more for the other man to release him. Then, the instructor lets go of the recruit, leaving him fallen and humiliated on the dirt. Looking down, Gate states that the young man thinks he's important just because he gets a lot of praise. Next, the master declares he knows clever and arrogant types like that kid all too well. Gate accuses the recruit of being nothing more than a pathetic coward who fights dirty. Mocking the situation, the warrior comments on how the giant backed down as soon as he saw his true power. Then, Gate sternly warns that he will kill him if he ever acts like that again. Watching the scene, the two guards comment, impressed by how well the instructor tames the rookies. Looking at his injured hand, Titan grits his teeth while trying to process the defeat he suffered. Elsewhere in the camp, the soldiers continue their daily tasks while working under strict orders. Suddenly, the officer hears a distant howl and wonders what is going on. In the combat arena, the man in charge announces the rules and decrees the start of the match. Annoyed by his comrade's question, the giant tells him to get out of his face. Observing the scene, the recruit comments that her rival is afraid of being defeated in the fight. Then, the instructor calls the next group and tells everyone to get ready to fight. The narrator announces the start of the match between the giant Baba and his small opponent. Pressured by the size difference, the young man seeks inspiration in the strategy of a small rodent. Determined to win, the young warrior charges forward, shouting that combat depends on the initial momentum. Surprising everyone in the arena, the giant Baba ends up losing his balance and falling all by himself. Faced with that unexpected result, the small recruit stands there, unable to understand what just happened. While the other recruits criticize his attitude, the young man simply ignores his peers' comments. Admiring his victory, the victorious recruit contemplates the greatness of nature around him. Excited for the next fight, the giant Baba runs to watch the grand combat live. Right after, the narrator announces the awaited showdown between the strong recruits Goliath and Titan. With a menacing glare, the young man warns his rival that he won't forgive him if he ends up getting hurt. Bothered by the provocation, Titan calls his rival weak and tells him to try attacking him. Then, the fighter claims he'll see if his rival keeps talking once his limbs are broken. Cracking his neck with a smirk, the recruit gets hyped up as he prepares to fight. In the next instant, the two giants collide with immense force in the arena during the match. Feeling the impact, Titan smirks mockingly, realizing that strength isn't everything. With impressive agility, the young recruit dodges the strike and takes his opponent by surprise. Applying absurd force, the young man lifts his rival into the air and slams him onto the ground. Watching the fall, the crowd shouts in surprise, asking if grapplers have the advantage in the arena. However, the fighter steps back, stating it's too early to decide the winner of the fight. Regaining his balance, Goliath praises his rival's skills but claims that won't be enough. Using his colossal strength, the recruit lifts Titan into the air and threatens to throw him out. Seeing the scene, the recruits in the stands marvel at the fighter's physical strength. Mid-air, Titan spins his body quickly to reverse his rival's attack. Catching his opponent completely off guard, the young recruit locks his neck firmly. With perfect technique, Titan locks Goliath's neck and takes complete control. Then, his rival throws himself backward with brute force, crushing the young recruit. With that, both fighters groan loudly as they try to break free from that ground lock. Even under heavy pressure, Titan shoves his opponent hard and leaps away from him. Right after, the young man gathers all his energy and winds up a devastating punch. With a powerful roar, the young man delivers the blow, creating a massive shockwave. As he recovers his stance, Titan curses his rival for continuing to resist in the fight. On the arena floor, Goliath grabs his opponent's leg while complaining about the situation. Applying absurd force, the fighter squeezes his rival's arm to lock his movements. Soon after, both combatants create distance and charge at each other once again. Leaping high into the arena, the duo repositions themselves in mid-air to unleash new attacks. Wasting no time, Titan rushes swiftly across the arena floor to land another blow. At the same time, Goliath blocks the charge, and the two collide again with immense force. In the stands, the recruits comment, highly impressed, that the pair is fighting without taking a single break. Watching that spectacle, the crowd cheers loudly while praising the intense contest in the arena. The narration highlights the strength and skill of the duo, whose fierce battle continues for hours. Taunting his rival, Titan tells the fighter to give up before he ends up passing out right there. Unfazed, Goliath taunts back, telling him to back off if he's so tired. With a focused look, the young man firmly asserts that he can keep fighting all night long. Meanwhile, the officer watches the hourglass and notes that the time limit has finally run out. Before the crowd, the instructor halts the fight and declares a draw between the two recruits. Dissatisfied with the final result of the match, Titan mutters softly, lamenting the officer's decision. Suddenly, the young man completely loses control and charges furiously, unleashing a powerful aura. Seeing the unfair surprise attack, the other recruits scream in desperation, trying to warn Goliath. Outraged by the disobedience, the officer shouts loudly, demanding the recruit stop the attack immediately. Trying to defend against the strike, Goliath complains that the match had already been officially ended. Charging forward without hesitation, Titan demands his opponent shut his mouth and die right then and there. Suddenly, Instructor Gate appears in the arena, ordering everyone to halt in a cold voice. Faced with that imposing presence, the young recruit freezes instantly, unable to utter another sound. Effortlessly, Gate catches the giant's attack and completely blocks the momentum of the charge. Down on the ground, Titan stares at the master's hand, realizing the immense gap between them. Faced with that scene, the other recruits remain in absolute silence, observing the tension in the air. Seeing the reaction, the fighter grumbles that his rival didn't even listen to his words. Lying on the ground, the young recruit curses furiously as he tries to contain all his frustration. Still quite irritated, Titan rants that he'll destroy everything if they try to remove the legendary weapon. With that, the text confirms that the intense conflict between the two recruits remained unresolved. On the morning of the ceremony, the officers order all recruits to hand back their tags. Upon turning in the tags, the soldier comments in surprise how fast the 6 weeks went by. He then adds that time used to drag on before, but it has already come to an end. Adjusting his clothes, Titan reflects that this is his last day wearing the official uniform. Hearing the calculations, the young man asks in surprise if he will really take first place. Then, his roomie considers that the final result still seems quite uncertain. In the temporary area, the officers officially announce that the class score count is out. Analyzing the official document, the veteran Jaga questions in surprise if that data was actually real. Before the paper, the officer incredulously states that it's impossible for both of them to have tied in points. Next, the officer confirms that both have tied for the first time in the ceremony's history. Paying no mind to the result, Gate states that the score doesn't matter, and the weapon will choose. Right after, the scene shows the grand ceremony venue situated in the Crimson Mountains. Faced with the combat emergency, the officer cuts the ceremony short and calls Titan and Goliath. Stepping forward, the rival warns that he will try first to save others from useless effort. In a mocking tone, Titan replies for him to celebrate his supposed moral victory all by himself. Reaching the altar, the officer orders the recruit to warm up and prepare for his attempt. Before the weapon, Goliath celebrates that his time to pull the artifact has finally come. Determined, the fighter firmly grips the handles of the weapon embedded in the rocky ground. As he forces the weapon, the young man murmurs that the real training will begin after his transcendence. Applying full force, Goliath wonders, unable to understand why the artifact won't come out. Watching the attempt, the officers wonder what happened, since it had worked like that before. Straining hard, the fighter rants that it will be a big problem if he can't remove it. In the audience, the other recruits comment in surprise upon seeing that the attempt ended in failure. The officer confirms the failure and tells him to step down, but the recruit refuses and keeps trying. With a cold glare, Gate approaches and orders the young man to get out of there immediately. Watching the other's failure, the soldier scoffs, stating that such an arrogant guy didn't deserve the choice. Hearing the crowd's exaggerated praise, the young man quietly asks everyone to be quiet. Right after the failure, the official announces the failure and calls recruit number 8. Before that scene, the other recruits react in bewilderment, unable to understand how both ended up failing there. Then, the crowd is stunned to notice that Goliath also failed after Titan tried. Right after, the officer approaches Gate, apologizing before explaining the new problem. The man explains that there is a rare rule granting 3 bonus points for eliminating a demon. The scene recalls the moment when the recruit raised the massive pillar for the throw. Then, the heavy log flew at high speed, falling straight onto the distant forest. At that exact moment, the thrown pillar followed a completely unexpected trajectory toward the valley. The object struck head-on a wild demon that was hiding among the local trees. Hearing that unbelievable revelation, Gate reacts in surprise as he grasps the big point turnaround. With the bonus received, the officer confirms that recruit 15 secures his official qualification. Then, the officer calls recruit number 15 to step forward before everyone. Completely shocked by the call, Baba stutters out his identity, unable to believe what he heard. Calling the boy, the officer informs that this class has no transcendent and tells him to try. With that, the entity's voice questions whether the weapon would accept someone so attached to his mother. Before the altar, recruit Baba remains tense while the crowd claims there is no chance. With his heart pounding fast, the boy sweats heavily as he waits in silence for the final result. Under heavy snow, a little baby lay abandoned inside a straw basket. Finding the basket, the woman wonders who would have the courage to abandon that little baby. Tenderly, she notices that the child isn't crying and displays a very sweet smile. Then, the boy tries to make his first sounds while observing the attentive woman there. Years later, young Baba questioned the reason he received food every day. The boy realized that she went hungry to ensure he was always well fed. Even being so weak, the woman confronted the other children to protect the little boy. While shivering from the cold in the hut, the woman kept sewing clothes without stopping for a second. Because of this, Baba didn't understand why he received warm gloves before his own mother. Upon being isolated by the children, the youth heard insults for being considered a large giant. Chopping logs in the forest, the boy questioned if his only trait was his exaggerated height. Carrying heavy loads in the winter, the young man wondered the reason he was so strong. Observing the house, young Baba hears the woman cough weakly while trying to say something. With a gentle smile, the debilitated mother asks if the boy really was so fragile. Looking back at the past, he questioned why he had received so much genuine love. Then, the young man wonders why she took in and raised someone like him. Furthermore, Baba remembers that he is a giant, and she is a human with no relation. Slamming the door, the youth yells at the woman to stop pretending to be his mother. Then, the young man wonders why she endured so many humiliations for him. Looking at the horizon, Baba remembers they said it was a plague without a cure. Lying in bed, the sick woman agonizes in silence while quietly calling for the young boy. With his head down, the young man hears his mother whisper that this would be her end. Right after, the woman apologizes for not being able to be a better mother. Even without strength, the woman says she would still really like to hear one last word. Facing the scene, young Baba keeps his head down without being able to say anything at all. Furthermore, the woman reveals she would love to hear the boy call out for her. Suddenly, the woman's hand loses its strength as life ebbs away there. At that moment, heavy teardrops begin to fall directly onto the bedroom floor. In tears, Baba leans over the body, desperately begging her not to go away. With his face covered in tears, the boy loudly begs for her to stay alive. Remembering the past, the narration shows the woman agonizing in bed and calling for her baby. Then, she whispers that listening to the boy's conversations was her greatest gift. Furthermore, the woman remembers that seeing Baba's smile made her very happy. With that, the mother asks her son to never cry and to always keep his smile. Looking at her son, the woman affectionately calls Baba her cheerful and talkative boy. Then, the mother explains that she doesn't smile because she is happy, but to attain happiness. Faced with this, young Baba intertwines their fingers, sealing a very important promise with her. Smiling in peace, the mother softly whispers to the boy, declaring all her love. Thanking her for having her as a mother, the youth promises he will smile every day. Looking at the sky, Baba states that he will always smile whenever he remembers his mother. With tears on his face, he asks her to be his mother again in the next life. Kneeling before the grave, the young man places flowers and asks if she agrees to the request. Observing that peaceful place, the boy says goodbye to his mother before leaving. Back at the military camp, the other soldiers notice that Baba has started smiling again. Curiously, a companion asks the reason for that constant smile and if something good happened. With a calm smile, the giant explains to his colleague that he doesn't smile because he is happy. Then, the young man adds that he smiles precisely to be able to attain true happiness. Right after, an intense energy emerges around them and begins to spread through the area. Faced with that impressive scene, Gate and the other officers watch everything, completely overcome with astonishment. Seeing what happened, the other recruits react stunned by the appearance of the new weapon. At that instant, the legendary combat gauntlet fits perfectly onto the arms of the new Transcendent. With this, Baba is officially confirmed as the new Transcendent while staring at his gauntlets. While resting in the stable, Gate ponders that the next host must be a beast type. Then the master wonders if his small companion is fulfilling all his orders. Walking through the camp, the warrior plans to use the special promotion to strengthen the group of Transcendents. Suddenly, the tent curtain is opened, revealing the inside of the new military quarters. Equipped with his new armor, Baba announces that his preparation is fully complete. Outside, Gate warns that the carriage has gotten cramped and tells the boy to go up front. Obeying the order immediately, the young giant responds loudly, confirming the instructor's request. As the night progresses, the carriage makes its way down the road, illuminated by moonlight. Driving the carriage through the night, Gate keeps his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Watching the path, the instructor explains that the urgent situation required pushing up their immediate departure. Hesitant, the young recruit replies that he could never sleep watching his master drive the carriage. Then, young Baba plucks up the courage and asks if he can ask an important question. Correcting his form of address, Gate tells him to call him an intermediary and allows the new question. Curious, the boy asks why the warrior participated in the training of the giants. Faced with the question, the instructor sternly asks if he was dissatisfied with the classes. The master then explains that there was a shortage of prepared officers to take over training the rookies. Gate adds that the advance of the troops altered the logistics for sending out the new classes. In a solemn tone, he declares that this rule will apply to both of them until the definitive end. Observing the illuminated camp, the narration confirms that they will never return to that military base again. Reflecting on the decision made, Gate welcomes the recruit into the new corps of transcendent warriors. Excited by the words he heard, Baba enthusiastically assures that he will give his absolute best. Upon hearing the recruit's promise, the experienced master merely agrees with a very serious look. The narration warns that the further the troops advance, the stronger the demons end up becoming. On the other hand, the narration guarantees that the group of transcendents will also become much stronger. Driving the carriage, Gate promises to solidify the position of the transcendents when the cruel war finally ends. With a focused gaze, the leader guarantees that their bloody achievements will never be in vain. At dawn, a voice repeatedly calls out to the young recruit, demanding that he wake up right there. Startled by the sudden call, the young man wakes up with a start while clutching his luggage. At this, the small ally mocks the boy for sleeping while the veteran pulls the carriage. Embarrassed, the recruit promises to correct himself immediately, while the gnome tells him to keep going with his luggage. Upon entering the fortress, Baba notices the heavy air and considers that he needs to adapt quickly. Side by side, Gate and his new ally move forward together to begin the dangerous mission. Upon arriving at the front lines, the temporary outpost emerges against the mountainous landscape. Meanwhile, Baba remains seated in the quarters, while the small gnome organizes the fabrics in the background. Noticing the work, Baba politely declines the offered help to fold the place's cloths. With that, a rather awkward silence settles between the two inside the private room. From the room's window, they watch Swan walking toward the unit's temporary quarters. Upon being called, the young woman explains that the veteran Jera ordered her immediate presence there. Then, the girl presents the papers containing the spell formula to her ally. Analyzing the document, he explains that the purification magic will aid the soldier's endurance. Next, the gnome suggests small adjustments to the magic structure to optimize the final result. Meanwhile, in the quarters, Baba remains in silence, waiting for the next instructions of the military routine. Suddenly, the new recruit feels a light touch on his shoulder and reacts with surprise. Turning around, the veteran orders him to follow him out of that room immediately. In an arrogant tone, the fellow asks if the newcomer knows exactly who he is standing before. Trying to impress the recruit, he displays an alleged scar received in the battle against the monsters. Next, the veteran claims to be an elf knight and demands respect from that new soldier. Furthermore, Nartz claims to have noble blood and says the other would never look him in the eye outside of here. Then the elf questions his abilities and demands that he recite the password of the day. Suddenly, the giant's stomach rumbles loudly, making the other show considerable discomfort at it. Fearfully, the elf stammers, trying to play it off by saying that it's common on the front lines. Suddenly, the small ally appears calling the recruit, interrupting the elf's conversation right there. Then, the recruit mentions that the small soldier will work on maintaining the fortress wall. With that, he hands over notes, asking the boy to memorize everything to adapt to the forces. As they walk, the young man explains that transcendents have resistance and don't need to use the handkerchiefs. Continuing along the path, the young man reinforces the instructions regarding the necessary protections for the local environment. Pointing to the stack of blocks, he orders the small ally to join the local workers. While carrying a massive block, two soldiers argue, blaming each other for unbalancing the load. Arriving with a gigantic block on his shoulder, Baba calmly asks where he should place that heavy load. A soldier directs him to the spot and explains to his impressed comrade that the newcomer is a transcendent. Suddenly, the young giant stops in his tracks upon hearing something coming from that direction of the camp. Facing the masked veteran, Baba gives a firm military salute, stating the watchword right there. Irritated by the attitude, the veteran questions whether military life seems easy to the newcomer. Then, he orders the superior to instruct the recruit properly, who promises to correct his behavior. Observing the giant, the soldier finds it strange that someone like him was chosen from the class. Looking back, the veteran wonders if it's truly possible for Gate to carry that much weight. From the top of the tower, the guard warns the warrior not to advance too far and to work carefully. Then, the lookout warns that the swamp area remains dangerous for the soldiers. Analyzing the terrain, Gate considers that the swamp covers all territories inhabited by the demons. As they walk along the wall, the narration explains that occasionally among the local creatures, others emerge. The text reveals that the beast is responsible for the mist, requiring caution despite its lower power. Walking side by side, the newcomer observes the master in silence as they keep the pace. Noticing the recruit's hesitation, Gate tells the boy to ask directly if he has any questions. Holding the purple object, the recruit asks if that is an edible fruit because he's hungry. Pointing to the swamp, the master explains that those are monster eyes, and Baba reacts with disgust. Upon observing the creatures, the newcomer understands the origin of the foul stench and feels the reality. Despite his sensitive sense of smell, the young man reflects that the swamp gas seems much more bearable. The narration details that the artifact's basic function purifies all the air around the transcendent. Meanwhile, Zania remains standing before the veteran Jera in the outer area of the military camp. Holding the small elastic band, the veteran directly questions whether the recruit was playing games with her. Next, Jera asks if she truly expects her to use that smelly thing in her hair. Lowering her head, the young woman notes that an hour has already passed in that endless cycle. The veteran orders the girl to fetch her hair tie from the tent, and Zania agrees to comply. Without finding the searched item, the recruit decides to give her own elastic band as a gift. With a somber look, Zania wonders what the veteran truly wants from her. Upon returning to the spot, the recruit hands over the hair tie while Jera observes her arrival. In silence, the young woman reflects that the veteran can ruin her mood in an instant. In a hostile tone, Jera claims that the girl should have died in combat during the mission. Downcast before the demand, the recruit apologizes in a very low tone to the veteran. With a cold look, Jera threatens to tear the recruit's mouth open if she apologizes again. Seeing no way out, the young woman silently concludes that she is completely out of options. Sitting on the crate, Jera questions if the task was hard while the recruit remains silent. Faced with the silence, Jera asks if the girl isn't going to answer, and Zania apologizes. Without any warning, the veteran delivers a hard slap to the girl's face right at that moment. With the red mark on her face, Zania remains in absolute silence, staring at the ground. Looking down with disdain, the veteran curses at the girl as tension rises there. Suddenly, the base's sound system broadcasts an announcement coming from the administrative office. The message summons all transcendents and support troops to the commander's office. Approaching, the archer asks if they heard the summons, and Zania celebrates in silence. Observing the scene, Jera grumbles enviably that it must be great to be so sought after. Out of patience, the veteran orders the girl to take the recruit and leave there immediately. Walking together, the archer asks if she is all right, and Zania answers that she can take it. The intermediary reveals that she also suffered when she was a novice and advises the girl to endure. The recruit thanks Scully for her concern, who replies that there's no need for any thanks. Next, the scene shifts directly to the main commander's meeting room. The narration explains that the beast demon Haka remains positioned near the dangerous bloody lands. The text adds that this hunter commands 2 subordinates and attacks seeking to exploit enemy weaknesses. Furthermore, the narration explains that this creature destroyed 3 divisions during the day of the turn. Next, the officer warns about the importance of eliminating Haka and his 2 subordinates. The text explains that the defenses worked well because the beasts fear the smell of blood. With the return of the main troops, the officer announces the start of the operation in 4 days. She adds that the creature Haka is extremely aggressive and rarely stays still in its territory. Given this scenario, the commander warns of the high probability of an all-out war against them. The text reveals that the great battle will take place on the plains located right in front of the military fortress. While listening to the explanation, the young man understands that the fight will take on a completely defensive format. Faced with the tactical analysis presented, the commander confirms the strategy with a very serious look. The narration highlights that archers and spearmen will play crucial roles due to their attack range. In addition, the winged troops will use hit-and-run tactics to support the ground forces. However, the leader warns that only the Transcendents can face the bosses in direct combat. Staring at the group, Rebecca states that the full responsibility for victory will fall upon the Transcendents. Without hesitating, Gate and the others nod promptly, confirming their understanding of the difficult mission received. Next, the Master ponders that the top priority will be matching that beast's speed. Thus, it is explained that Morris and Swan will cover for Baba's inexperience in dealing with the 2 demons. Meanwhile, the explanation introduces the host of the Bloody Lands, the colossal and menacing beast Haka. With a fixed gaze, Gate firmly declares that he will defeat that terrible monster completely alone. While eating heartily, Baba wonders if it's because they are on the front line. Chewing excitedly, the giant praises the meal, saying it's better than civilian food. Curious, Morris asks if it's tasty, and Baba confirms, saying it tastes like real homemade food. Interrupting the conversation, Gate reminds him that the glutton tried to eat a monster's eye. Then, the master tells everyone to finish eating so they can gather in the bloody lands. At the meeting spot, Gate explains that the gatherings of the Transcendents will take place near those lands. Recalling the previous battle, the leader mentions the moment they defeated the host Grothan. The narration recalls that all subordinate monsters disappeared simultaneously after the boss's death. The document indicates the end of the fight, but the warrior warns that the current situation has changed. Gate details that killing the host Haka will not make the demons Zaka and Raka disappear. With a focused look, he reinforces that these creatures will remain alive even after defeat. Baba suggests focusing on Haka first, and the leader agrees, highlighting the boy's importance. Then, Gate explains that this was why he demanded intensive training earlier. Hearing the explanation, the girl wonders if they can defeat 3 Grothan-level monsters. Terrified by the threat, the recruit notices Baba's calm and wonders if he understood. Curious, the elf asks the large recruit if he is okay, or if something is bothering him. Receiving food and triple pay, the young man doesn't understand why they are asking about him. Then, Baba comments that the served soup is a bit bland for his taste. Right after, the instructor orders the rookie to stay put while the others go rest. As night falls over the fortress, the moon softly illuminates the local great walls. In the meeting room, the commander analyzes the tactical map with candles lit around the room. Observing the pieces on the table, the leader remains focused on the combat strategy. Facing the scene, the winged officer states that he needs Commander Rebecca's full support. Then, the warrior recalls the captain's past success and requests her help. Analyzing the report, the superior acknowledges that Gate should not remain in a low position. Suddenly, a guard rushes into the room, calling loudly for Commander Rebecca. Surprised by the sudden interruption, the leader asks the reason for that late-night visit. Quite tense, the winged officer reports that the swamp mist has advanced over the area. The narration reveals that the dark substance crossed the walls and invaded the outer area. Hearing that shocking revelation, the captain exclaims in shock, unable to believe the news. From atop the wall, the guards silently observe that strange mist covering the entire place. The report warns that the swamp invaded the fortress, and creatures are attacking the temporary structure. Pointing to the horizon, the winged officer asks everyone to look at the distant hill. Before everyone, a gigantic creature appears on top of the hill, releasing a very heavy aura. Then, the soldier warns that the temporary barrier will last until dawn at most. Facing this, the leader orders Moai to wake everyone up immediately to arm themselves and gather. Then the officer questions how that happened if they were theoretically safe for 4 days. The warrior explains that the creatures release more fluid than normal, spreading everything quickly. Noticing the danger in the air, he asks if there are enough handkerchiefs for all the soldiers. In response, the ally states that the effect has diminished, but they have a sufficient amount in stock. Right after, the archer introduces herself, announcing that all troops are armed and gathered. At the announcement, the winged officer watches the young recruit in absolute silence for a moment. Then, the warrior asks the intermediary Scully if she is fine without wearing a handkerchief. The girl replies that she is fine because the small ally used breathing magic on her earlier. At that moment, the small soldier approaches, raising his arm to present his report. Morris explains that he completed the practical tests and can cast the magic over the entire area. At the announcement, the winged officer asks the exact duration of that magical effect. The gnome explains that the spell uses breath and will last as long as they can breathe. Hearing that unbelievable explanation, the 2 winged guards react with extreme surprise. With that, Morris positions himself atop the wall, raising his staff to channel. Concentrated, the small mage recites the spell's words to spread the great magical protection. Immediately after, a magical mist expands from the staff, covering the entire surrounding area. With that, the wave of energy hits and envelops all the soldiers gathered in the courtyard. Feeling the effect, the recruits celebrate that they can breathe normally and praise the aroma. Observing the crowd, the winged officer reflects on the great relief brought by the respiratory restoration. Then, the leader decides to use the news to boost everyone's morale in battle. With a focused look, he ponders that he needs to act quickly to eliminate the soldiers' uncertainties. Right beside him, Gate praises the small ally's work, who promptly responds to the leader. In thought, Morris wishes that this achievement will help secure his master's promotion. Under the moonlight, the winged officer takes off toward the sky in front of the troops. Hovering in the air under the moonlight, the commander prepares her address to the soldiers. With her powerful voice echoing through the night, Rebecca demands the immediate attention of all troops. Flying over the camp, she repeats the order in a loud tone to gather the entire army. Then, the commander declares that the swamp gas will no longer be able to stop them there. Raising her voice, Rebecca announces that everyone can finally breathe with total freedom in battle. Right after, the officer decrees that from that moment on, the fortress gates will open. Before the attentive troop, she explains that the chosen strategy is quite simple and clear. Rebecca warns that the demons outside will invade the place as soon as the passage opens. Therefore, the leader orders everyone to maintain wing formation during the defense. Unsheathing her sword, the commander orders them to focus their attacks to reduce the enemies to dust. Then, Rebecca declares that the place will become a graveyard to control that entire region. Raising her blade high, she states that glory will come from swords and spears. Hearing the speech, the troops cheer enthusiastically while demanding the opening of the great gates. Hearing the clamor, the warriors prepare themselves while the small gnome swallows hard in fear. With a firm and focused look, Instructor Gate gives the final order to open everything. Slowly, the wooden door opens, revealing the darkness filled with dark magic particles. Immediately after, a massive horde of dark creatures violently advances through the open entrance. Among the crowd of invaders, the terrible demons named Zaka and Raka stand out. With its sharp fangs exposed, the terrible beast snarls loudly while preparing its attack. Suddenly, the colossal creature named Haka releases a terrifying roar across the entire field. Then, the brutal impact of claws hits the fortress structures with extreme force. The dark mist spreads rapidly across the stone base, making the ground shake intensely. At the top of the mountain, the colossal beast observes the battlefield, releasing its aura. Amidst the violent combat, the troops bravely defend themselves against the attack of the demons at the fortress. While the demons attack the gates, the Federation responds by opening the wing formation to bombard them. With this, the narration explains that the soldiers hold a great advantage, unlike the confrontation in Grothan. Following Commander Rebecca's strategy, the archer orders rapid shots against the enemy creatures. Then a rain of arrows strikes the heads of the monsters advancing through the camp. Suddenly, an ally shouts for Scully to watch out as the beast charges at her. Reacting to the surprise attack, the girl strikes the monster hard using her own bow. Focused on the battle, Scully asks if they know what pulling a bowstring really means. At that moment, the winged soldier performs a swift dive, cutting down the enemy in mid-air. Observing the defensive line, the female warrior notes that the troops are holding their formation firm. The narration explains that half of the demons have invaded the fortress, while the other half remains outside. Furthermore, the text highlights that this is the ideal moment for the Transcendent to advance together. Observing the combat from above, the commander calls out loudly for the Transcendent squad. Then, Rebecca orders an immediate advance, while Gate and his companions get into position. With that, the group of Transcendent advances with determination straight toward the center of the battle. Charging furiously against the horde, the warrior leads the attack, slashing through the monsters in his path. With a swift movement, Gate delivers a powerful strike, splitting the monster in half. Right after, the giant advances, crushing the creatures with the power of his gauntlets. Shouting in the middle of the battle, Gate announces that he and Baba will clear the path together. Then, the leader reinforces that the absolute priority is to reach Chief Haka quickly. Upon hearing the direct instruction, the three companions respond together, confirming their master's order. With that, the group of Transcendent leaps together through the smoke toward the fight. Advancing without hesitation, the team completes the first breach and crosses the fortress gates. Leading the charge, Gate points forward and orders a direct attack against Haka. From the top of the wall, Scully watches the group depart and offers a silent prayer. With a deeply focused look, the young archer prays for everyone to return victorious from there. In the middle of the open field, the quartet advances together, destroying every creature in their path. While running, the mage notes that the rookie fights without hesitation in his first battle. Without slowing down, the fighters maintain their fast pace over the slick local ground. Looking at the distant horizon, the group confirms there is little distance left to reach the monster. Focused on the run, the leader notes that only 300 meters remain to reach the giant monster. Picking up the pace even more, Gate closes the distance to 100 meters from his main target. Suddenly, the warrior announces that they have finally reached the colossal creature in front of them. With a menacing gaze, the monstrous beast bared its sharp fangs as it stares at the warriors. Then, the monster lets out a terrifying growl while preparing its attack against the young man. Surprised by its agility, the young man tries to position his sword to block the extremely fast blow. However, the monster's lightning-quick attack slices through the air and delivers an extremely violent slash. Struck on the shoulder, the young warrior staggers as blood spurts from his fresh wound. After the impact, the two beasts quickly turn around, growling loudly with their sharp fangs. Just ahead, the host Haka emerges accompanied by his two subordinates on the battlefield. Seeing the critical situation, the recruit raises her staff and recites a powerful binding spell. Instantly, large claws of dark magic emerge from the ground toward the enemy monsters. The dark binding magic violently hits the ground, trying to contain the rapid advance of those demons. Looking back, the leader is deeply impressed as he comments on the enemy's extreme speed. At the same time, Baba adjusts his gauntlet upon noticing one of the monsters charging at him. With a devastating blow from his gauntlet, the giant lands a direct hit on the advancing monster. Surprised by the impact, Baba thinks he just swung blindly, but ended up landing a direct hit. The narration explains that the recruit's simple nature translates into pure courage during battle. Watching the scene, Gate reflects with a smile that such an attitude also represents great talent. While watching his ally, the narration explains that the best combination for a defender requires buffing. Naturally, the best choice to support the warrior on the front lines is a defense boost. Raising his staff, the small gnome casts magic to greatly increase the giant's defense. Under the effect of the magic, the new transcendent feels a magical aura surrounding his entire body. Impressed by the power he received, Baba declares that the spell's strength truly gives them a fighting chance. At the same time, Gate watches the enemy's movements, keeping his eyes intensely focused on the battle. Noticing the threat emerging from the left, the leader quickly turns his body to dodge the blow. With extreme speed, Gate leaps into the air, delivering a devastating strike with his great sword. The sharp blade cuts through the air with extreme violence, generating a devastating impact on the ground. Upon landing on the ground, the young warrior's eyes widen as he notices something very strange there. Suddenly, an extremely sinister presence emerges behind the young man, making the local atmosphere quite heavy. Faced with that threat, the giant beast appears and roars violently right above the warrior. Then, Gate quickly dodges to the side as the monster's attack misses completely. The narration explains that the warrior can already wield his sword using only one hand. However, the text warns that it is impossible to cut an enemy that moves so quickly. Furthermore, the narration highlights the overwhelming difference in speed between the young man and the beast. Suddenly, Gate looks back as he realizes the creature has positioned itself behind him once again. With that, the young man raises his sword in time to block the monster's violent attack. At the same instant, the beast charges furiously and bites down directly on his sword blade. Holding his ground, the warrior grips the hilt tightly while trying to push the beast back. With a brutal clash, the monster hurls Gate violently against the rock wall of the area. Losing his footing causes the young man to plummet through the air as he tries to hold on to his greatsword. Then, the giant monster leaps into the air in pursuit to attack the falling young warrior. From above, the beast delivers a devastating strike that cuts through the air toward the ground. With the heavy impact, Gate is thrown far away without being able to recover his posture. Seeing the scene, the elf and his small ally cry out in desperation, calling their master's name. Then, the young warrior plummets at high speed down the rocky wall of the massive mountain. Even though severely injured, Gate shouts, asking his companions not to worry about him. Then, the leader tells everyone to stay alert and focus their combat on these monsters. Raising his staff, the elf mage begins to recite the spell of eternal sleep. Right after, magical binding chains emerge from the ground in an attempt to trap the monsters. Quite apprehensive, Uldring realizes that the beast's physical speed prevents the magic from reaching them. Faced with this, the two creatures charge together at high speed to attack the young mages. Suddenly, the giant Baba steps up in front and holds off the massive beast's attack. Watching the fight, the elf considers the great difficulty of facing two such powerful enemies. Then, he remembers that there is only one dark magic formula for this situation. The mage explains that the spell causes confusion to make the monsters fight among themselves. Under the effect of the new magic, the two beasts begin to tremble, covered in energy. Then, Uldring asks if his small ally can trust him to try once again. The elf explains that the confusion only works in silence and asks to negate all sound. Understanding his companion's strategy, Morris promptly replies that he will carry out the requested task. Heeding the request, Uldring recites the spell, demanding absolute silence to channel all the energy. Then, a massive magic circle rapidly expands and covers the entire battlefield. Seeing the sensory deprivation field resonance activated, Oldring simply comments that it worked. Gate remembers that their mana is limited and that buffing strength lasts only a short time. On the other hand, the gnome explains that the metal structure retains the spell much longer. Thinking about strategy, the warrior remembers that Morris must take Swan and Baba against the monsters. He reflects that keeping his ally close for short spells would waste both of their mobility. With that, Gate decides that the best path will be applying the buff directly to the blade. Surprised by the decision, Morris asks worriedly if enchanting the blade will really be enough for everything. The leader reinforces that the gnome's role is crucial and tells him to save mana for emergencies. Gate assures that he will be fine with the enchanted blade while facing the great beast at the top. Closing the beast's mouth, Oldring notes with surprise how quiet the surrounding area has become. Confused by the silence, the elf mage looks back while his small companion gestures hurriedly. The gnome explains that he silenced everything except his voice and orders the elf to cast the spell. Regaining focus immediately, Oldring agrees with the command and prepares to cast the magic. Concentrating energy into the staff's crystal, the elf mage begins the process to cast the magic. Next, the young man blows softly onto the object to create a layer of icy frost. Finally, he draws the serpent's tongue over the crystal to complete the ritualistic spell. Concluding the ritual, Oldring recites the magic words to induce combat between the beasts. With that, the confusion sorcery spreads around the young man with great intensity. The narration explains that this curse amplifies their mutual disgust to make them fight each other. Immediately, the two monsters shift their focus and begin attacking each other with extreme violence. Overcome by confusion, the two beasts furiously bite each other's necks on the field. Seeing the scene, the group realizes that the Discord sorcery worked perfectly against both of them. Satisfied with the result, Oldring celebrates how easily they eliminated the threat of the monsters. Suddenly, the young giant emerges from behind and easily lifts the small gnome. Very politely, Baba warns that he will proceed with the plan while carrying his companion. Looking at the night sky, the young man notices the swift approach of the army commander. With her large wings spread, Commander Rebecca emerges, descending impressively straight from the high sky. Next, the young giant advances swiftly while carrying the small mage, who screams in surprise. Upon being placed on the ground, the small ally looks back, surprised by the movement. Before him, the impressive commander emerges in full view, imposing her full presence on the location. As combat intensifies, the group recognizes they will need direct support from the captain. The narration explains that the amplification tower can only be reached by flying through intense turbulence. The officer explains that the only person capable of leading this mission must have prior experience. With that, the man reveals that this important responsibility falls solely on Captain Rebecca in battle. Flying high, the commander warns that she will not speak in the turbulence area where sound is amplified. Next, the leader orders them to follow the original plan while the small soldier confirms the instruction. Facing the dangerous situation, the boy swallows hard as they advance through the extremely turbulent sky. Recalling the explanation, the ancient manual appears while the advisor asks them to listen carefully. In the memory, Gate explains that beast demons mistake the whistle for orders from superiors to howl. The text details that exploiting this natural instinct will allow them to paralyze the powerful beast demon chief Haka. The narration adds that the creature moves absurdly fast throughout the entire combat. Recalling the conversation, Morris approaches, calling for Gate to reveal a very important piece of information. The gnome explains that his whistle reaches low pressure, while superior demons require a much higher intensity. Listening to the boy's concern, the warrior calmly replies that this amount will be more than enough. The master recalls that the tall amplification tower will take care of multiplying all the sound produced. Near the large structure, all sounds are amplified tenfold, creating a deafening noise. Braving the strong turbulence in the air, the gnome comments that he cannot even open his eyes. Next, the winged captain flies fast, carrying her small companion to the top of the structure. Upon setting the boy down on the elevated platform, the captain steps back to let him execute the plan. Facing the fierce wind, Rebecca warns that she will return to pick him up after the sound of the whistle. Standing firm at the top of the high tower, Morris promptly responds, confirming his leader's instruction. Watching the leader fly away, the young man waits until she leaves the amplification zone. Sensing the right moment, the small mage decides to resolve the entire situation at once. Next, Morris activates cardiopulmonary buffing magic to increase his breathing capacity. Enveloped by an intense energy, the small soldier takes his position at the top of the high tower. Next, the small mage blows the whistle, releasing an extremely shrill noise across the field. Faced with the devastating sound, the warriors on the ground cover their ears to endure the noise. As she flies over the area, Rebecca watches the sound wave spread across the entire region. Upon hearing the agreed signal, Gate keeps his gaze fixed to begin the next phase. Immediately, the demonic creatures freeze their movements and begin howling relentlessly on the field. The narration confirms that all beast-type demons stopped and began to howl. Seeing the paralyzed creatures, the female warrior excitedly shouts that this was their big chance. Pointing forward, she orders the soldiers to finish off the enemies before them. Without hesitating, the female warrior advances with determination and prepares to strike the giant monster. With a devastating punch, she strikes the creature, splattering blood all over the place. At the same time, the other soldiers attack together, slashing the monsters around them. With a precise sword movement, the warrior beheads another beast without giving it a chance to react. Next, the young man completes the spinning strike and destroys the monster that was trying to advance. Nearby, the archer Scully quickly takes position to fire at the remaining targets. Observing the success of the strategy, the young girl whispers Morris's name, acknowledging his feat. The girl recalls when their small ally trained exhaustively with the whistle under Gates' orders. Meanwhile, the colossal monster continues howling loudly while remaining completely paralyzed on the spot. Standing right before the creature, the warrior observes the incapacitated beast and prepares his attack. Seeing that the plan worked perfectly, Gate adjusts his military combat stance to finish it. Concentrating his energy, the young man invokes the Federation's standard sword technique to attack. With his eyes fixed on the target, Gate declares the second basic form for the strike. With overwhelming force, the young warrior swings his great sword to slash the beast. Next, the horizontal slash hits the giant monster dead on, generating a devastating impact. Furthermore, the narration explains that without shared consciousness, the demons will ignore the howl. Faced with this revelation, Gates states that this is their only chance to win the battle. With that, the young man reinforces that they must take advantage of this unique opportunity to end the fight. Focusing all his energy, Gate declares that he will give it his all just this once. Concentrating all his strength, Gate watches the sky while preparing his next decisive attack. With a crushing blow, the young man strikes the giant monster, making it roar in surprise. Even wounded by the recent attack, the monstrous creature continues to growl, maintaining its threat. Watching the enemy, Gate wonders why the howl had no effect on it. Meanwhile, the panting recruit Baba adjusts his combat stance beside Oldring. From atop the rocks, the massive beast glared down at the two young warriors standing on the ground. Faced with that scene, the elf mage silently questions how everything ended up this way. Suddenly, a high-pitched sound pierces the air and echoes intensely across the entire region. The narration explains that the sound of the whistle triggered the immediate howl of the beasts. At that moment, Oldring yells for Baba to charge, and the young man confirms he will launch the attack. Leaping into the air, the recruit activates the magic buffing left by Morris on his gauntlet. Focusing all his energy, Baba declares to himself that he will crush the monster's head. With a devastating impact, the young man strikes the beast's head, splattering blood through the air. Next, Oldring calls out to his companion and casts his vine-grasping spell. With that, magical claws entangle the monster in midair, while the creature lets out a roar. Meanwhile, one of the creatures flees toward Haka after regaining consciousness. Analyzing the situation, Oldring notes that one beast fled while the other woke from the howl. Next, the young man explains that this monster has no ears to hear the whistle. Facing that giant creature, Oldring concludes the group has fallen into the worst-case scenario. Meanwhile, the giant beast growls menacingly as it positions itself directly in front of Gate. Watching the enemy, the master realizes the howling operation turned out to be a failure. The warrior assesses that they eliminated one demon, but the other allies failed to gather. Furthermore, the leader deduces that his companion's part of the plan also failed. With no other options left, Gate decides he must immediately activate the final combat plan. With that, the young man leaps into the air, wielding his greatsword to strike the beast. Focusing energy into the blade, the master unleashes a swift mid-air slash at it. However, the giant monster reacts swiftly and thrusts its sharp claw at the warrior. The lightning-fast attack strikes Gate squarely in the back, causing blood to spurt out heavily. Feeling the blow to his back, the young man realizes the monster's animal senses are reacting. Landing heavily on the ground, the beast continues growling while glaring at the badly wounded warrior. The narration explains that the monster reacts instantly, seizing any opening to deliver a fatal blow. Just as Gate had suspected, the terrible demon Haka could sense that purely through instinct. Faced with that situation, the monster realized the warrior before it was weaker. Furthermore, the beast knew the young man was inferior and far less powerful than itself. As it leaped violently, the monster considered its opponent infinitely slower in that fight. Next, the creature's brutal attack hits the young man's sword, creating a massive impact. Grit-toothed, Gate holds his greatsword tightly, trying to withstand the blow. Right after, the beast lunges forward again, and the warrior barely manages to block the attack. Surprised by its speed, the young man notices the monster's head suddenly appearing right beside him. With that, another devastating blow shakes the air as Gate tries to hold his ground. Landing heavily on the ground, the demon glares at the warrior while releasing a heavy aura. Swallowing hard, the young man realizes that this beast's sense of speed is on another level. The narration highlights that the monster's speed is completely unmatched here. The young man admits that regardless of his strength, he feels like a turtle facing a pack of hyenas. Unable to react, Gate can only block the incoming strikes, realizing he will never match that speed. Taking the heavy impact, the warrior suffers another violent blow while struggling to stay standing. Next, Gate is thrown far back, using his sword to regain his balance in midair. As he resets his stance, the young man realizes he will lose this clash if it turns into a battle of attrition. Facing the ferocious beast, the master openly acknowledges that he stands no chance of victory. With his face bleeding, Gate calls out to his companions Morris and Swan to execute their joint plan. Running hurriedly across the terrain, the gnome demands maximum speed from all his companions. Gazing up at the sky, the small ally silently thanks Captain Rebecca for the support. Next, Morris warns that the operation has failed and orders them to switch to the backup plan. Rushing forward, Swan calls for Baba to hold off the monster's attack a little longer. Surprised by the effect, the girl wonders what that magical expansion could be. Approaching her, Morris announces that he has extended his range and orders her to activate the mist. Focusing hard, the small gnome plans to distribute his mana with absolute precision during this final operation. While the giant holds down the monster, the small ally decides to cast all his buffing on him. Agitated, Swan explains that casting that magic without seeing her master will consume a massive amount of her energy. Quickly, the small gnome confirms the coordinates and commands her to cast the spell on the designated area. Receiving the exact coordinates of the area, Zinnia confirms the command and prepares to cast. Focusing all her energy into her staff, the girl softly chants the spell's magical words. Right after, a thick, dark mist rapidly spreads across the nocturnal battlefield. The recruit realizes that the mist will cover everything, affecting even their own allies. Reflecting on the past, Zinnia admits that all that rigorous training turned out to be extremely useful. Then, the girl wonders how this mist will help Gate defeat the beast all by himself. Suddenly, the recruit is startled to see both companions leaping across the terrain together. From above, the colossal monster leaps into the air over the mist as the allies watch. In silence, both mages watch the beast's movements with extreme vigilance. Gradually, the shadow ink mist spreads in swirling spirals, covering the entire sky. Noticing the shift around him, Gate mutters, recognizing the presence of the shadow ink mist. Wielding his sword, the master remarks that he knew he could count on his two companions. The warrior admits he was certain about the tower, but still doubts the final plan. Despite his doubts, Gate considers that this is their only remaining option to win. Then, the dark mist closes in around the warrior, enveloping the entire area. With a sharp, focused glare, Gate announces he is about to execute his final combat move. Next, the master swings his greatsword, generating a powerful wave of dark smoke. Leaping into the air, the warrior uses the strike's momentum to quickly reposition himself. The narration explains that Gate uses the mist to restrict the dreadful demon's vision. With that, the beast snarls in irritation as the young man makes a swift escape through the thick smoke. Sprinting across the terrain, the young man tries to put plenty of distance between them to secure his escape. However, the heat trail left behind by Gate remains visible through the darkness. The narration emphasizes that trying to hide from a demon's sharp senses is completely futile. Guided by its wild instincts, the monster Haka relentlessly follows the heat signature. Roaring with extreme fury, the creature pounces through the mist, pursuing its target's trail. Suddenly, the monster is caught off guard as a sharp blade surges right before its eyes. Waiting in the darkness, Gate reveals that he lured the beast straight into a lethal trap. As the monster roars furiously, Uldring casts his magic toward the creature to contain it. Next, Baba observes the monster's agility and remarks that it has extreme speed. However, the recruit states that he can endure the force, but isolated defense is useless. Suddenly, the beast delivers a crushing blow that hurls the heavily injured youth to the ground. Seeing the violent impact he suffered, Oldring screams his companion's name in absolute despair. Next, the monster speeds past Morris, making the small ally back away. Facing the sudden threat, the little mage raises his staff and activates his defensive energy. Surprised by the scene, Morris widens his eyes as he realizes the beast's strange trajectory. Looking back, the gnome wonders in confusion why the creature passed right by. In the distance, Oldring screams Baba's name again, worried about his companion's condition. Analyzing the movement, Morris wonders if the beast might not be using its eyes to see. Wasting no time, the little mage recites the spell to activate complete sensory deprivation. To save mana, he decides to focus the resonance range directly on the beast's ears. Under the impact of the magic, the creature's claws skid noisily over the rocky ground. With that, the beast freezes its march on the field while everyone watches the scene in surprise. Watching the scene, Oldring remarks in surprise that the fast beast ended up completely paralyzed there. Right after, Morris warns that he will apply buffing and tells Baba to move forward to reunite with Gate. Worried, Oldring alerts the gnome to wait for the monster's complete containment before casting the spell. Next, the elf mage adds quite apprehensively that they will never get a second chance there. Before the group, Oldring asks the recruit directly how he intends to finish off the great beast. Recalling his training, the giant reflects that this chokehold can bring down any terrible beast. With firmness, Baba declares he will strangle the monster until its neck breaks completely. Hearing this, Oldring instructs Morris to wait until Baba immobilizes the beast before applying the full buffing. Next, the elf mage adds that he will use his containment vines to support the recruit. With the plan set, Baba positions himself in front of the beast, which remains frozen there. Letting out a long sigh, the youth tries to control his nervousness while his heart beats fast. Next, the recruit takes a very cautious step toward the monster, which remains motionless. Advancing in silence, Baba walks behind the creature's back while watching every detail carefully. Maintaining caution, the youth approaches carefully, trying to reach the scary beast's neck. At that exact moment, Baba extends his arms to apply the powerful chokehold directly on the monster. With that, Baba locks his arms around the creature's neck with force, trapping it in a violent immobilization. Taking advantage of the moment, Oldring orders immediate action while conjuring the final containment spell. Immediately, purple magical bindings wrap around the beast's head while the monster lets out a roar. Right after, Morris channels his magic, casting direct strength buffing onto the recruit. As he feels the magic energy expand, the young giant senses the overwhelming surge of power. Gathering all his energy, Baba declares he will put all his power into that single move. Exerting immense strength, the recruit forces the monster's neck while the beast roars terribly. Watching the tense scene, the two mages shout in encouragement, asking for just one more small effort. Next, sharp snaps echo through the area as the great creature's neck begins to give way. With a devastating impact, Baba rips off the beast's head, scattering blood all over the place. The narration explains that reacting only with vision during battle is already too late. With that, Gate risks his final move and delivers a powerful strike through the mist. Advancing through the air with speed, the warrior cuts through the darkness while seeking to hit his main target. The narration highlights that the master uses the shadow ink mist to blind the beast demon Haka. Completely disoriented by the lack of vision, the giant creature moves directly into the deadly trap. Next, the youth moves quickly through the mist, trying to ensure his escape from the area. However, the text explains that he leaves an afterimage, unable to hide his heat. Furthermore, the narration reinforces that escaping the keen senses of the beast demon is useless. Driven by pure instinct, Haka swiftly follows that trail to reach the warrior in the mist. Facing imminent danger, Gate rests his sword on the ground and takes a firm stance. Next, the memory recalls the warning that it is not the warrior himself who moves. The master adds that he is actually using his rival's own strength and speed. Continuing the explanation, the voice reinforces that these attributes of the enemy will be used against him. Meanwhile, Haka leaps fiercely from above, pursuing the silhouette spotted on the dark terrain. However, the narration explains that the monster realizes something is horribly wrong there. The beast realizes too late that it has lost control of its speed with no room to swerve. With a focused gaze, Gate states that precision overcomes strength, and timing wins out. Next, the young man executes the second basic form of the Great Federation's sword technique. With overwhelming force, the horizontal slash hits the beast and cuts its body in half. Under the impact of the devastating blow, the creature completely disintegrates before the high walls. Seeing the demons vanish, the soldiers remark that the air is returning to normal. From atop the wall, the young archer celebrates, announcing that intermediary Gate won the battle. Rushing frantically over the rocks, the companions urge each other to hurry to their destination. Lamenting the slow crossing, the youths hope to find Gate completely safe. Suddenly, Morris halts abruptly as he stares at the scene before him. In the distance, the group spots the master standing among the sliced bodies of the monsters. Standing frozen before that scene, the companions speak Gate's name, unable to believe the outcome. Turning his blood-covered face, the leader greets everyone and praises their good work. Impressed, Baba comments that the master exceeded expectations and destroyed the creature with ease. Next, the recruits talk and agree that military life is indeed quite intense. Without the magic effects, Morris complains of pain and wishes for a healer as the next recruit. Suddenly, the remains of the defeated beast begin to emit a special glow on the ground. Watching the event, the girl recognizes that it is the exact same occurrence as Grothan. With extreme precision, the warrior uses his heavy sword to slice the monster's piece. Next, the master consumes the valuable portion to further empower his body. The bestiary text details that the defeated monster yielded 2 special cuts of flavorful meat. Observing the beast's remains, Gate smiles and remarks that this time he managed to get 2 special cuts. Analyzing the food, the warrior notes he doesn't feel that insatiable hunger, as if he isn't the owner. Next, Gate asks his companions if they feel the pull and tells them to take their share. The giant recruit ponders that even he doesn't feel like eating and doubts the others will. To the giant's surprise, little Morris suddenly rushes forward and voraciously devours the meat. Right after, the girl also takes her portion and begins eating the monster's food. Swallowing the piece, Swan lets out a long, smoky sigh and calls out the master's name. The girl states that the food is amazingly delicious, while the monster's resonance emerges around her. The explanation reveals that Swan's new ability inflicts fear and instantly freezes opponents. Next, the text highlights that Morris gained extreme speed as he dashes swiftly around the area. Pleased with the result, Gate smiles and comments that both companions acquired quite useful abilities. Looking toward the horizon, the master announces they will return to the outpost once they finish their work there. Finding several full chests, Gate explains that the beasts hadn't touched the war treasures. However, the master notes that the chests are locked and decides to take them back to await the artisan. In silence, the warrior watches his small companion skillfully handle the locks of the chest. Upon opening the chest, Morris plainly explains that his grandfather used to work as a locksmith. Staring at the massive fortune, Swan asks how many coins that entire treasure would be worth to the team. After that desperate and impossible battle, the soldiers gathered at the fortress gaze at the distant horizon. Soon, Gate's unit returns victorious, bringing the enemy's head and the treasures. Before that solemn scene, the soldiers at the camp remain in absolute silence without saying a word. With a smile, the captain openly declares she knew she could trust the warrior completely. With that, the crowd cheers as they realize the unit of transcendence has become a reality. Observing the group, Rebecca concludes that those warriors have become completely indispensable to the Federation. Finally, the members of the troop march forward together as everyone acknowledges them as true heroes. The scene displays the construction area of Hakka's fortress under the moonlight. Waking up to the noise, young Scully gets uncomfortable inside her sleeping bag. Then, the girl wakes up quite startled upon hearing her comrade calling her name. The archer complains about her rest, but the soldier warns her about the order to return. The young elf patiently explains that the new class of summoned recruits consists of archers. Upon hearing the news, Scully reacts in shock, unable to believe what she just heard. Meanwhile, the scene shifts directly to the recruitment center on the distant mountain. The text highlights the legendary magical bow Gundiva appearing gleaming amidst the crimson cloud. At the military camp, the warrior asks if everyone is properly prepared for the new mission. The small ally comments curiously about which new transcendent will take the position of direct assistant. The gnome shows envy of the tasks, while intermediary Scully complains about working with assistants. Remembering the hot water schedule, the girl quickly says goodbye and runs away. Impressed by the great speed displayed, the elf officer calls Scully as soon as she arrives. The officer offers a magical carriage for transport, but the young archer politely declines. Then Scully explains that her personal mount is already waiting just below to depart. Approaching her mount, The archer affectionately pets the creature's snout. Right after, the massive animal leaps with agility and lands softly in front of the two soldiers. Smiling, Scully asks if her colleague wants to ride the mount, warning that she would be thrown off. Mounted on the beast, the girl bids farewell with a military salute before starting her journey. As the young girl quickly moves away down the road, the other soldier murmurs that she was cute. Then Gate comments on Scully's perfect timing, and the other officer questions the reason. Looking to the side, the warrior reveals that high-ranking officers will return soon. The officer asks about deserters, but he explains the harsh punishments applied to their families. Furthermore, Gate states that everyone will return on time, except the dead or transferred. The next day, the scene shows the recruitment center headquarters during dawn. While stretching, Scully comments that she traveled all night but feels excellent. The girl explains that photosynthesis is essential and highlights that she received her new uniform. Smiling softly, Scully reflects that throughout her whole life, she always went unnoticed by everyone. The young girl remembers that her family was average, and she received all the domestic chores. Furthermore, Scully shows that even her grades at the academy were right on the overall average. The narration details that the next territory will be different for common soldiers without major official promotions. She acknowledges that common soldiers gain nothing, but celebrates the arrival of her big day. With that, the girl declares to herself that today, she will be the main star of that presentation. Then, the shout demanding full attention echoes loudly before the gathered crowd of recruits. Introducing herself firmly, Scully announces that she is the instructor in charge of selecting the unit's new archers. However, some recruits murmur discontentedly, questioning why the leader was not present there. Upon hearing rumors about her family, the young girl sighs at the disrespect shown by the soldiers. With a very dark gaze, Scully threatens to show who she is if anyone else speaks a word. Then, the instructor tells them to keep talking if they want to find out the real extent of her power. Faced with this immense pressure, all the recruits freeze in silence, recognizing the veterans' true experience. Warning them about the tight schedule, Scully demands quick obedience and receives a positive response from the students. Near the storeroom, the boar causes great chaos while the veterans complain about the animal's behavior. Then, the instructor announces the shooting demonstration and tells everyone to pay close attention. Demonstrating the correct combat posture, the young girl teaches them to position themselves sideways to dodge attacks. Then, the veteran explains in detail how to use the sight's trident to adjust distances. Next, the instructor guides them to release the bowstring while slowly exhaling. Right after, the arrow hits the exact center of the target with impressive precision. Faced with the demonstration, the recruits comment that such skill is required to serve in the central unit. Then, Scully asks if anyone needs a left-handed bow and calls the first recruit. Recruit number 1, Georgia Durang, introduces herself as the great promise of her family. Upon seeing the girl, the soldiers comment that she is the most talented member of the family. While the girl takes aim, her peers comment that the transcendent slot is already hers. Firing with agility, the recruit lands 3 arrows right in the center of the training target. Seeing the perfect score, everyone praises the young girl's impressive performance with the bow. Dismissing the result, Georgia comments that the standard bow felt a bit strange to her. As the scores are announced, the recruits notice that almost no one managed to hit the target. Upon seeing the 0 score on lane 12, the recruits laugh and search for the one responsible. Right after, recruit number 12 reveals herself to be the well-known young Rabin Brie. Impressed, the soldiers recall that she is a famous pharmacist, admired for her immense beauty. As the crowd reacts in surprise, Rabin gently enjoys the scent of a delicate flower. Watching the young woman, the recruits comment enchanted about how she is even more beautiful up close. On the other hand, some recruits criticize her body, saying that elves should be lean and agile. In addition, they mock her, stating that Rabin's family treats bows like mere musical instruments. The girls continue criticizing and claim that they resort to tricks because they don't know how to fight. Then, the recruit complains that training with artists makes other races despise archers. Interrupting the malicious gossip, the new recruit approaches, demanding that everyone stop that. The young woman explains that everyone there is an apprentice, and they are together in the same military situation. Then, Askal asks directly if Rabin's childhood friend did something against them. While the officer orders the shot, the rival insults Askal's family with contempt. Smiling maliciously, her peer asks if the plan was properly prepared as agreed. Showing the tampered arrows, the boy confidently assures that she won't hit a single shot today. Holding the batch of arrows, Askal analyzes the sabotaged material and remains in absolute silence. Then, the young recruit takes her position on the training ground to make her attempt. The narration highlights the girl as the leader of the rival family and the main candidate for the test. Receiving the command to fire, Askal pulls the bowstring, aiming at the distant target. Watching the scene, the recruits comment in surprise that Askal has a great reach due to her height. Then, the young woman pulls the bowstring, applying great firmness in her hands. With the shot, the heavy impact on the target makes the soldiers ask if it was a cannon. Stunned by the thunderous noise, the other recruits look at each other, not understanding what happened. Right after, the direct hit confirms the maximum score right in the center of the target. The explanation shows that hitting the center mark guarantees the highest possible amount of points. While one recruit highlights the perfect shot, the other counters, claiming it was pure luck. Ignoring the rumors, Askal focuses her gaze and prepares her second quick shot. Then, the second arrow hits the target with precision, splitting the first one in half. Faced with the impressive scene, those present wonder in disbelief if that was truly possible. Shortly after, the final shot hits the center of the target again, securing another maximum point. From atop the tree, Instructor Scully watches the scene and comments in surprise on the feat. With all perfect shots, Askal completes the course and confirms her position as a master archer. Observing that result, the recruits remark in awe that Askal's skill is truly extraordinary. Faced with such a display, Recruit Georgia glared at the training field with a dark look. Walking beside her rival, Askal ironically thanks her for the arrow she received during the drill. Irritated by this provocation, her companions approach asking if Georgia was all right at that moment. Overcome with great anger, the young woman guarantees she will teach her rival a lesson today. Suddenly, a very soft voice calls out Askal's name as a hand appears. Hearing that sudden call, the girl turns her face in silence to see who was arriving. Displaying a very gentle smile, Rabin congratulates her friend on her excellent performance with the bow. Recognizing her childhood companion, Askal smiles back and speaks the young woman's name. Curious, Rabin asks about her friend's mother and hears that she talks about her a lot. As the two exchange compliments, the other recruits comment in surprise about the romantic atmosphere emerging. Quite enthusiastic, Rabin details the posture adjustments and style used in those perfect shots. Hearing such precise analysis, Askal shows surprise while hesitating, not knowing what to answer. With an excited gesture, the girl places a delicate flower bracelet on the other's wrist. Smiling brightly, Rabin joyfully declares that the gift will bring her friend great luck. Right after, the other recruits ask for Rabin's autograph, and she kindly responds to everyone. Watching the scene from afar, Askal reflects that her friend remains the same since childhood. From atop the stage, Scully loudly commands all recruits to present their bows. In response, the entire troop of recruits raises their bows together, confirming the order received. Next, the instructor announces that the day's training has ended earlier than expected. With that, the veteran instructs everyone to settle on the ground to rest for a bit. Immediately, the recruits sit on the ground, celebrating in relief the permission given for rest. During the break, the instructor asks Rabin to play a song using her bowstring. Excited by the request, the young woman promptly accepts while her companions cheer around her. Introducing herself as the National Fairy, Rabin excitedly announces the start of her grand performance. Surprised by her talent, the recruits watch the girl play the instrument like a beautiful violin. Before the attentive crowd, a lovely melody spreads softly throughout the military camp. Moved by the music, a recruit recalls when he cut his hair very short. Crying heavily, the soldier remembers looking in the mirror and calling for his mother. Listening to the song, Scully praises the choice of music for touching the hearts of the new soldiers. Focused, Gate attentively flips through the worn pages of that ancient book of records. Observing the moment, Morris asks how many times the master had already read that ancient bestiary. Without taking his eyes off the book, the warrior replies that it was his only reliable resource. Gate then adds that the text in ancient script brings increasingly deeper doubts. Before the captain, the warrior states that the next operation will be far more difficult now. Furthermore, the master considers that historical records about the fortress are very rare there. With that, Gate asks his superior to consider his special request for the new military mission. Staring at the young man, the commander firmly asks if he was really being serious. Without hesitating, the warrior promptly replies that he was completely sure of his final decision. Right after, Gate turns to the door and directly calls for the little gnome there. The master reinforces the boy's importance, who promptly responds, confirming the grand mission received. Following the master from afar, Morris wonders what had suddenly happened to him there. Noticing the boy lost in thought, Swan approaches and asks if something was wrong there. The little gnome comments on the leader's obsession with the book, while the girl questions his trust. Firmly, Morris declares that he actually doesn't trust the bestiary, but he trusts Gate completely. Hearing that, Swan simply replies that she also trusts Master Gate very much. Meanwhile, the leader analyzes the old documents while sighing deeply inside his quarters. The narration highlights the imposing fortress, considered a completely impregnable base since ancient times. Furthermore, the text explains that the demons fortified the location against any aerial attack. Observing the structure, Gate wonders how they will manage to invade if the gates remain completely closed. To make matters worse, the narration reveals that the host of the Bloody Lands remains completely unknown. The report indicates that thousands of civilians ended up being brutally massacred by a single demon. With that, the young man concludes that the lack of information makes the new mission even more dangerous. However, he reflects that for that very reason, the rewards of battle will be completely guaranteed. Thus, the narration confirms that the true journey of the group of Transcendents will begin at that moment. At the night camp, the officer loudly commands, demanding the recruits' full attention. Instructor Scully demands night discipline and orders everyone to follow orders without any delay. Faced with the direct instructions, the recruits shout back, confirming their understanding of the order. Next, the girl leaves the military tent while carefully observing the surrounding area. Watching in the darkness, the veteran spots the distant recruit and confirms she found the boy. Suddenly, recruit number 1 and her group surround Askal, asking about unsettled matters between them. Georgia then states in surprise that she found the sister of the girl who ruined her family. Threateningly, the young woman demands that her rival kneel before her to earn forgiveness. Mocking her, Askal laughs and asks if the girl is still stuck on that old story. Keeping calm, the young man suggests they clarify the real facts about that situation. Furthermore, Askal explains that her own sister destroyed the marriage all by herself at the mill. Angered by the response, Georgia scoffs that a good beating will resolve everything much faster. At that moment, young Rabin timidly intervenes, trying to stop the major argument happening there. Worried, the girl warns that they shouldn't fight because the instructor will arrive soon. Irritated by the interruption, Georgia furiously asks the reason for that flower in her hair. Without hesitation, the recruit attacks Rabin, stating that this isn't the civilian world for acting. With a violent slap, the aggressor tells the young recruit to get away from that place immediately. From the strike, Rabin falls heavily to the ground while the others just watch the scene. Witnessing the attack on her friend, Askal reacts in shock and calls out her name. Fallen on the rocky ground, the girl clutches her face while trembling, completely bewildered. With her fist clenched on the ground, Rabin calls out to Georgia, demonstrating that her patience has run out. With a completely dark glare, the recruit states that they have crossed all acceptable limits. In a fraction of a second, the attackers suddenly appear fallen and defeated on the facility floor. Fallen on the rocky ground, the other recruit merely groans weakly after the attack she suffered. Walking slowly through the area, the young girl approaches the recruit who remained fallen before her. Pressing her foot onto the girl, Rabin tells her to take it easy with the situation. Next, the girl complains in a cold tone that they ended up ruining her flower crown. With that, the narration reveals the terrifying nicknames given to the young girl due to her violent history. With a dark look, Rabin states she doesn't sleep without flowers and asks what they are going to do about it. Hearing the sudden noise, the young woman rushes forward, asking what was happening there. Right after, Rabin observes the attackers fallen and completely defeated on the ground of that area. Disguising the situation, she asks if they are okay and feigns surprise as she mentions the boar. With a dark look, Rabin tells them to be careful and warns that assault will hurt their grades. Faced with that terrifying threat, the recruit wonders in fear what was wrong with her. Watching the scene, Askal remembers that this delicate image of Rabin always brought a lot of trouble in the past. In silence, the young woman concludes that her companion hides an extremely firm and dangerous personality. The next day, the recruit positions her bow, imagining the firmness of a rock to shoot. Pulling the string with extreme precision, Georgia takes a deep breath while focusing on the distant target. Watching the young woman's posture, the other recruits whisper, criticizing that different shooting style. From atop the tree, Scully watches the scene stunned. recognizing the technique used in those shots. Focused on the objective, the girl keeps her eyes fixed while adjusting her aim with extreme firmness. In her memories, the instructor guides her to close her eyes and listen carefully to the sound of the wind. With closed eyes, Rabin feels the air's vibration as she prepares to make the shot. Next, the released arrow cuts through the sky at high speed toward its distant target. As she shoots, the recruit remembers to release the bowstring following the melody. She releases the string slowly, maintaining an elegant posture while shooting her bow. Soon, the shot hits the apple up high, securing a perfect score for the girl.
Analyzing the papers, Scully notices the different style and searches for that recruit's full name. Next, the document confirms number 12, accompanied by the name of the young Rabin Brûlé. Watching the girl from afar, the instructor recalls the old rumors about that family. The narration reveals that the legendary Hood Brûlé created that famous horizontal shooting style. Seeing this, Scully realizes that the legendary technique managed to survive to this day.
Furthermore, the veteran notes that the style returned in an even more evolved form. With the end of training, 2 candidates are selected for the legendary weapons ceremony. Before the altar, recruit number 17 Askal and the young Rabin Brûlé arrive together. With a firm voice, the instructor calls recruit number 12 to begin her attempt. Hesitant, the recruit answers, confirming the call as she moves slowly toward the great altar. In silence, she wonders if someone who only acted on stage can bear such responsibility. Noticing her companion's hesitation, Askal calls her name to offer her support. Faced with this, Askal states that the girl must not falter because she is the transcendent. Next, the young woman adds that Rabin was never anything less than the best. Hearing those encouraging words, the girl agrees with a smile and confirms her friend's words. With a focused gaze, the recruit declares that she will accept this destiny given to her. Next, Rabin proudly states that she will accept the mission because she is the most beautiful. Right after, the young woman moves forward, while her friend remains behind, watching her steps there. Suddenly, Rabin shoves her companion and rudely demands that she get out of the way. Frightened by the attitude, Askal steps back while the girl threatens her with death in a cold tone. Before the altar, the instructor commands the candidate to begin the warm-up for the attempt. Upon receiving the order to pull, the recruit reaches out her hand to grasp the weapon. Without hesitating, the girl grips the handle of the object firmly embedded in the ground. Focusing her energy on the goal, Rabin assumes a firm posture to remove the embedded item. At that exact moment, an intense dark energy surges around as she forces the weapon. Little by little, the mysterious shadows begin to clear from the area during the massive effort. Suddenly, a colossal shadow entity emerges in the air, staring firmly at the young recruit. The shadow entity declares that she is the candidate for transcendent chosen by the legendary artifact. Observing the girl up close, the mysterious spirit seems to analyze the young candidate in silence. Next, the creature comments that the ancient masters of the bow always possessed beautiful bodies. The spirit adds that it prefers leaner people, stating that the girl exceeds that type a bit. However, the entity concludes by accepting the recruit, admitting she isn't that bad. Hearing the evaluation, Rabin curses the entity and openly complains about its ugly face. Faced with the creature's surprised reaction, the young woman plays it off, saying she was just talking to herself. Irritated, the entity threatens to send the girl back home for that cheeky attitude. Without hesitating, Rabin demands to be sent away, claiming to have countless suitors waiting for her. The spirit promises benefits and glory, but the girl rejects everything and reiterates that she wants to leave. Faced with her insistence, the entity officially grants the powerful magic bow to the young recruit. Seeing that the girl continues to ignore it, the spirit yells, telling her to take the weapon immediately. As soon as the power is absorbed, the entity panics, screaming that it was not finished yet. Holding the released artifact, Rabin expresses surprise upon noticing that the spirit simply vanished from there. Seeing the bow successfully pulled out, the officers and instructors watch the scene in disbelief. Right after, the text officially confirms that the young Rabin Brûlé is the new transcendent. Striking her famous pose, the girl celebrates, saying she has finally become the national transcendent fairy. Looking at her new weapon, she wonders if that means she will have to face demons. Upon arriving at the post, Rabin receives a shovel to begin the digging work. Standing with the tool, the girl hears the officers ordering her to start digging and stacking bags. As she digs endlessly, a soldier watches the scene and comments that it looks pathetic. Nearby, Morris holds the bag while murmuring, looking for a sharp object in that place. Suddenly, a recruit approaches the gnome, offering an object to help him with the task. While the recruit details his family's key, Morris notices that it cuts the fabric. Watching the young woman from afar, the master asks why she seems so familiar to him. Upon hearing his companion reveal that she is the famous Raban Brûlé, Gait reacts impressed. Staring at the recruit from afar, the elf comments that in person she looks much more ordinary. While the girl holds the shovel, the soldiers comment on her melancholic and slow look. In the distance, two female veterans watch the new recruit working non-stop in the middle of the yard. Observing the scene, the veteran comments that that type of girl is what Jera hates the most. With that, the veteran silently promises to try to protect the recruit and help her against Jera. Meanwhile, the other elf plans to leave as soon as the replacement takes over the post. In addition, the question arises as to how the resilient Rabin will handle that relentless veteran. The narration highlights the inevitable future encounter between the young recruit and the strict Jera. Noticing the restlessness of the administrative superiors, the officer orders his subordinate to get news immediately. While complaining about the lack of privileges, Jaga knocks on the office door, introducing himself formally. Right after, the administrative building stands out under the late afternoon light. Suddenly, the veteran enters the room terrified and screams, announcing a serious emergency. Surprised by the reaction of the others, the warrior asks what happened and tries to answer. Extremely tense, Jaga reveals that two high-ranking officers are returning to the unit. Hearing that, the veteran angrily questions if they shouldn't be going to another post. Annoyed by the situation, the veteran grabs Jaga while the young man tries to explain himself nervously. Pressed in the conversation, the warrior adds that the pair volunteered for the Central Front. Faced with this unbelievable revelation, the veteran screams, asking if those soldiers have gone completely insane. With a very anxious look, Jera asks directly who the two returning officers are. While playing cards, a soldier mocks the other's hand, but the other challenges him to bet. Next, the companion suggests stopping by administration, but Ulti mockingly says they will come after them. Sensing the approach in the outer area, the winged soldier looks curiously through the opening in the wall. Then, Jero tells his gaming partner that he will step away briefly to meet some acquaintances. Walking out of the room, the young winged man smirks, murmuring that things are about to get very entertaining. At that moment, Nartz approaches the visitor on the road, calmly asking if he needs help. In a polite tone, Garo asks the veteran for the exact location of the command center. Pointing in the right direction, Nartz shows him the way and asks for the reason behind his visit. Suddenly, the young winged man loudly introduces himself, revealing his class and designation. Hearing about his lower class, Nartz scoffs, pointing out his lack of respect and military salute. Startled by the reprimand, Jero quickly apologizes while giving the veteran a proper salute. Irritated, Nartz scolds the rookie and demands to know why he keeps smirking like that. Suddenly, another soldier approaches, saluting and greeting the high-ranking officer. Flashing a dark smile, Jero remarks to his subordinate that this recruit was questioning his attitude. Realizing the officer's true military rank, Nartz freezes completely, consumed by sheer terror. Pressed by his superior's question, the soldier hesitates, not knowing how to respond. Without warning, Garo slaps the subordinate, asking why he is staring so intensely. Next, Jero looks around at the group and comments that even the girls were present. Right beside him, the two subordinates keep their heads down, without uttering a single word. With a quick blow, Garo strikes the soldier while openly complaining about their incompetence. Staring at the subordinate on the ground, the young man indignantly asks if there is no one decent around. Suddenly, the officer raises his hand and tells the other man to wait right there. As he approaches, Ulti silently ponders that he must respect veteran Jera's seniority. Looking at him, the soldier notices how much that violent man hates humans even more. In a threatening tone, the veteran tells the soldier to step forward to receive another beating. Without hesitation, the veteran delivers a brutal kick to the soldier's leg. From the impact of the blow, the man drops to his knees on the ground, holding his leg. Then, the brutal veteran lands a heavy punch right on the fallen subordinate's face. Looking to the side, Ulti asks how they trained a recruit who is already acting up like this. Without stopping his assault, the veteran continues to beat the soldier extremely ruthlessly. Watching the violent scene, the man grumbles that humans only listen when they get beaten up. Walking away from the spot, Jero complains in disappointment that the others didn't even greet them. Looking from above, the winged veteran spots other soldiers gathered near the tents. Then, the young man recognizes a subordinate and comments that Bouts recently died in combat. Given that, Jero questions why rookies are in the strategy room alongside high-ranking officers. The girl explains that the Transcendents arrived at the base for meetings about the Bloody Lands. Hearing this, Jero sarcastically asks if this place is an army or a social club. Then the young winged man turns around and calls out directly for veteran Jera in the area. In a stern tone, he asks if she lost interest in the military camp's discipline. Furthermore, he warns that overlooking mistakes will make subordinates lose all respect. Because of this, the officer orders him to stop the beating and tells his companion to follow him. Looking back, Jero coldly warns that he will be watching everyone's behavior tonight. With her head bowed, Jera simply confirms she understands the order she received. As the sun sets, the scene shifts to the strategy room tent. Inside the room, the officer explains that the skin of high demons resists ordinary swords. Hearing the warning, Gate and his companions react very seriously to the revealed information. The narration explains that high-level demons use language and tactics, greatly increasing the difficulty. Next, a manual on practical swordsmanship is presented as a compilation of valuable techniques. Analyzing the manual, Gate decides to restudy the swordsmanship techniques focused on weak points. Right after, the officer asks the captain if they can't just fly and open the gates. In response, the officer warns that an aerial attack is impossible due to the defensive beasts. The narration details that the spitter beast launches acidic saliva capable of killing within 3 days. Additionally, he warns that the attacks would melt all winged troops before they could even get close. For that reason, that impregnable fortress also became known as the Graveyard of Troops. The officer concludes that the bestiary only provides superficial data on the land's host. He then explains that advancing by land is safer since the beasts cannot lower their aim. Furthermore, the scout confirms she mapped out the wall's structure and enemy routes. With that, the captain approves Gate's plan and asks if the gnome is ready. Promptly, the little ally confirms the order while thinking they will finally execute that special plan. In his memory, Leader Gate reassures him that the boy is a crucial member of that unit. The gnome considers that victory will secure a major promotion for his dedicated and steadfast leader. Determined, the small soldier promises to ensure the mission's success to reach that desired promotion. Next, the officer declares they need to revise their strategy to defeat the unknown entity. Faced with the warning, all warriors at the meeting remain in absolute silence, listening intently. As night falls over the military base, the meeting finally comes to an end. Walking outside, the gnome complains about the delay, but Gate reinforces his great importance. Suddenly, the leader stops in his tracks upon noticing a figure waiting near the tents. Standing there, the young man spots the elf veteran sitting on a wooden crate. With a stern look, Jera orders everyone to gather behind the quarters immediately. Hearing the command, Gate agrees while murmuring exhaustedly about the army's terrible routine. Then, a voice from above criticizes the youths for thinking they are special just because they are transcendents. The officer scoffs at their past victories, stating that the returning veterans were not impressed. Furthermore, he reveals that their superiors are eager to break them due to their terrible reputation. With a menacing glare, Jera states she received orders to break them and commands everyone to stand up. The veteran warns that they will be under strict supervision and threatens to punish anyone who smiles. Maintaining an extremely cold expression, the woman stares at the recruits to assert her authority. Faced with such heavy pressure, the girl remains silent, trying to hold herself back before the veteran. Suddenly, veteran Jera calls out recruit Rabin right then and there. Then, the woman turns away coldly and orders the girl to follow her immediately. Faced with a direct order, the young recruit quickly replies, confirming her superior's request. As they walk, her companion warns that Jera's humiliations are about to start at any moment. Furthermore, she advises Rabin never to talk back to the provocations and just endure in silence. While the other girl explains this single rule, Jera strikes the rookie hard in the face. With a look of contempt, the veteran asks if no one taught her how to look at a superior officer. Then she delivers another violent strike, demanding that the recruit fix her gaze. Head down and bruised, Rabin wonders if she should lose control or keep enduring it all. Staring at her raised hand, the girl hesitates between snapping completely or swallowing her rage. With a red cheek, the recruit ponders if she should turn the tables and attack the veteran. With disdain, Jera tells the girl to stop acting like an artist and remember she is in the army. Seeing Rabin looking down, the woman says she seems distracted and asks if she thinks this is unfair. Tired of the girl, the veteran orders her to go to the quarters and bring her instructor immediately. Seeing the recruit bow, Jera questions the delay and demands that she move. Faced with the order, the recruit begs the veteran to direct all punishment onto her alone. Surprised by the audacity, Jera turns around and asks what the girl just said. Faced with the confrontation, Rabin declares that Scully has nothing to do with this and demands to be punished alone. Facing the recruit, Jera bursts into a mocking laugh upon hearing her demand. Then, the veteran claims she has never seen anyone so ignorant and agrees to vent everything on her. Kneeling on the ground, Jera decides to test the girl's resolve to see how much she can endure. Showing the larva in her hand, the veteran orders the rookie to eat the insect to be released. In the palm of her hand, the disgusting creature continues to wriggle while the young girl watches in silence. Faced with that attitude, the recruit holds the live larva while keeping her gaze completely fixed. Then, Rabin firmly extends her hand and takes the larva directly from the woman. Without thinking twice, the girl places the live insect inside her open mouth. Right after, the recruit chews the insect hard while covering her mouth with her hand. Witnessing that unbelievable scene, Jera's eyes widen, unable to believe what she is seeing. Unbothered by the taste, the young girl continues chewing the food on the spot without hesitation. Finally, Rabin swallows the whole insect at once right in front of the stunned veteran. Next, the girl announces she is leaving and turns her back on the woman. Watching the recruit walk away, Jera laughs in disbelief and calls the young girl crazy right there. From a distance, Rabin observes Gate's group while the narration highlights the Federation's diversity. To his companions, Gate explains that veterans use the military hierarchy to control very different races. Then, he states that the Transcendent Squad will overcome everything in their own way. Watching all of that, the girl clenches her jaw and states she will not accept this situation. Next, Rabin questions how there are still such despicable people acting like this in the middle of a war. Determined, the young girl promises to make the veteran crawl, as she always returns offenses threefold. The next day, orders require using only a cloth and a brush when cleaning the equipment. Meanwhile, the veteran Asen warns that using water to make cleaning easier will bring severe punishment. Then, she instructs her subordinate on what to answer if an officer comes looking for her. Curious about the situation, the recruit timidly asks if his superior currently has a boyfriend. Faced with the question, the giant lands a violent punch on her subordinate's face without hesitation. Walking away annoyed, Asen orders the boy to polish everything until it shines under threat of more blows. Very pleased with passing on her chores, she plans to rest while work at the base continues. Lying in the hammock, the narration highlights that the giant has an ideal personality for the army. In the mess hall, the narration explains that the giant race is usually quite indifferent to violence. While eating, Gate notices that the score for eliminating the demon is insignificant in the evaluations. Because of this, Gate explains that achievements at that simple level are not enough to guarantee recognition. The warrior states he is prepared for this, highlighting the Federation's conservative rigidity regarding ranks. With that, Gate declares they need to eliminate a high demon to stand out. The leader considers that bigger targets guarantee more points, accelerating promotions for the entire team. With these achievements, Gate states they will be able to restructure all operations around their group. Then, the young man declares they will create a stable system and asks everyone to endure a bit more. Determined, Gate states these makeshift meetings will end soon, as results are close. Meanwhile, the officer orders the squad to assemble at the entrance of Haka's lands. Suddenly, the unit's elf cook screams in terror as he notices a massive threat emerging. Holding his shovel firmly, Droneen desperately begs the creature to stay away immediately. Stuttering heavily, the cook warns the giant boar that he needs to protect the entire local warehouse. With a menacing glare, the wild demon blows smoke as it prepares to charge. Right after, the monster attacks violently while Droneen screams desperately in the face of the assault. Hearing the sudden loud noise, Swan and her small ally look toward that direction in surprise. Lifting her tray, the young girl readies herself, while remembering that cornered animals attack everything. Furiously, the wild demon charges forward, destroying the wooden fence blocking its path. Then, the monster dashes swiftly toward the warrior who was awaiting the beast's approach. Without hesitation, Gate delivers a crushing blow that hurls the creature forcefully against the ground. Dazed by the violent strike, the beast remains dizzy, unable to balance itself properly there. Taking advantage of the moment, Swan channels her magic and invokes a dark binding magic to capture the animal. Right after, the magical energy wraps around the animal and easily lifts it into the dry air. In the kitchen, the cook firmly grips the handle of the frying pan as he prepares to intervene. Receiving Morris's buffing, the man applies the culinary technique with extreme physical strength. With the devastating impact of the strike, the animal is hurled high into the sky. Plummeting from above, the animal crashes noisily onto the ground right in front of the terrified elf Droneen. Terrified by the scene, the elf laments, saying the supply officer will certainly punish everyone. Smiling excitedly, the cook states the meat is fresh and suggests preparing spicy pork. Observing the success of the joint action, Gate comments that teamwork worked really well. Right after, the captain orders an immediate advance, and the entire troop responds promptly. Perched atop the rock, the winged soldier silently observes the movement of the troops. With an ironic smile on his face, Garo asks if that could really be called proper discipline. Then, the officer questions if his subordinate has gotten lazy, but she denies it immediately. The veteran warns that a lack of discipline will breed disrespect, and she confirms she understands. Holding his pipe, Garo mutters to himself that he really dislikes that attitude. Shifting the conversation's focus, the officer instructs everyone to pay attention to the map. Pointing to the region, he explains that the place used to house a busy market called Greekon. The master reveals that an ancient secret steel door was used for smuggling and bribes. Then, the account highlights that the famous secret passage became known as the Black Gate. Surprised by the name, Morris remembers that his beloved grandfather founded the former Hats group. Suddenly, the veteran tells the boy to shut up and return to the quarters immediately. Then, the leader explains that the main gate does not open by itself, but the side door does. With that, the master orders Morris to climb the wall and unlock the door from the inside. Furthermore, the warrior stipulates that the entire task must be completed in just 15 minutes. If something goes wrong, he instructs the boy to seek shelter and wait inside. Finally, Gate warns that the Federation will launch an all-out attack if the door remains closed. Since shared mana is limited, the alternative plan will divert energy into a full-scale assault. Then, the elf considers that strengthening the infiltration attack will be much more efficient. Staring intently, Gate reinforces that their small ally's role is crucial to opening the door. With a firm look, the master instructs the boy to just do exactly as they trained. Finally, the day of the major suppression operation in the Bloody Lands begins under a dark sky. Right after, a magic signal explodes in the air, announcing the definitive start of combat. Observing the horizon, the captain warns that anti-aircraft beasts make aerial entry dangerous. Before the massive fortress, the entire central core of the Federation gathers in full formation. With a steady gaze, Rebecca calls the little gnome and asks if he is ready. All around, officers watch the moment in silence as they await the boy's response. Looking back, Gate calls for the small recruit to confirm the start of the dangerous mission. Fully equipped for infiltration, Morris confirms readiness and prepares to act at the location.